Rittenhouse verdict. Protesters in Brooklyn hit the streets Friday evening, Ashok Bala reports.
About 100 people gathered outside Barclays Center with no reported incidents. This protester voiced her frustration.
I'm here in solidarity and sadness and in anger to share with my people, because we already saw this coming. We knew this was coming.
Earlier in the day, Mayor de Blasio tweeted, Anthony Huber and Joseph Rosenbaum are victims. They should be alive today. The only reason they're not is because a violent, dangerous man chose to take a gun across state lines and start shooting people. To call this a miscarriage of justice is an understatement.
The jury in the Charlottesville trial has finished the first day of deliberations without reaching a verdict. Brad Siegel has more.
The jury was sent home Friday night. They'll return Monday for the civil trial against the organizers of the deadly 2017 Unite the Right rally. That rally was held to protest the removal of a Confederate statue. It turned violent in clashes with counter-protesters, leading to the death of 32-year-old counter-protester Heather Heyer. 10 white supremacist and nationalist organizations are among those now being sued by those claiming they suffered life-altering injuries at the rally. I'm Brad Siegel.
Iconic boy bands are taking the stage for a holiday celebration. ABC will be hosting a very boy band holiday featuring members of NSYNC, New Kids on the Block, Boyz II Men, 98 Degrees, New Edition, and O-Town singing the group's greatest holiday hits. You're listening to the latest on NBC News Radio.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT Willow Springs is powered by ComEd. Lower your energy bills and reduce your carbon footprint with the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program.
A vacuum. She got a vacuum. Sadie was a bit befuddled. For this gift was not on her list. Yet here it was, from her loving mother. Oh, but wait, this tale isn't as vacuous as it seems. Because a dog is something Sadie always wanted. But dog hair? Well, not so much. And what loving mother saw when she happened upon HSN while looking for a gift with gravitas was an engineer named Dyson, who has always done things differently. An artist at heart and at brain. Making things better was in his bones. Hence a cordless vacuum with a power and pickup that takes care of pet hair. So that's how we ended up here.
I love it.
Dog hair gone. So now, dog here, who is aptly named Dyson. So now, Sadie has 2 Dysons and 1 great holiday tale to tell. QVC and HSN. This is shopping brought to life.
This is John Daniel, President and Business Manager of the Sheet Metal Workers of Smart Local 265. The principles that guide me are rooted in the simple belief that united we stand and divided we fall. We the people must recognize that a diverse environment with unique points of view is a foundation for success. A culture where labor and management work together inspires innovation, promotes inclusion, creates a sustainable growth for business, the workforce, and our communities. When the entrepreneur's vision is developed and improved with the voice of a unionized workforce, you build more than just a product, you build a stronger future. I want to personally thank everyone who voted for President Biden. He believes in unions. Blue Collar Biden signed the American Rescue Act of 2021, which secures vested pension benefits. It funds improvements of indoor air quality in K-12 schools and provides additional Paycheck Protection Program loans to support small businesses. This is John Daniel from Smart Local 265. Join me in celebrating a return to sanity and a sustainable middle class. Stay union strong.
Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only America,
but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks. The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. You know, if Republicans are right about all of you, then I'm interrupting all of you while you watch the Harvard-Yale game, which is apparently going on right now. But I actually don't think they're right, and I don't think I'm going to be interrupting many of you watching that game. I do think, though, sometimes we Democrats get more anxious than we need to. So for all you pessimists, all the hand-wringing naysayers, everyone who engaged in that particularly Democratic sport, the circular firing squad, I have one word for you on this chilly Saturday: Nancy. And she delivered. I mean, with nothing but sabotage from the GOP since Election Day. Democrats, and I agree, we're a boisterous, argumentative, passionate, and patriotic bunch. We came together to pass really more important legislation in this House than any time since the 1960s and 70s. It's a stunning achievement. I mean, just think back to the American Rescue Plan. It staved off economic disaster during the worst of the COVID pandemic. It was a big bill, and would have been hard to pass, in other times, but it passed. Then we passed and now signed into law that bipartisan infrastructure bill, something the GOP said they were going to do. Donald Trump said he was going to do, but they couldn't get it done. They couldn't deliver. We delivered. This is going to build roads and bridges, airports, intermodal transit hubs, ports, rails. It's going to bring broadband everywhere. And by everywhere, I mean to rural America where there are like 3 Democrats, right? But when you govern for everyone. This is a big deal. It's not the kind of thing that just rewards your supporters. It's good for the whole country, and Democrats are proud to do it. And the infrastructure bill has serious efforts to mitigate climate change. Then yesterday, and I hope you guys were watching, I actually put myself through not all 8 hours, but a lot of Kevin McCarthy's just crazy rant the night before. But I'm glad he did it because we got to pass this bill in the day when a lot of people were watching. And the Build Back Better plan, I mean, I got calls from everybody. It can't happen. This person's not giving. This person's not giving. Somebody else on the Democratic side's taking money. A lot of finger pointing. The House passed this bill, and it's awaiting Senate approval. And I'm confident that with some tweaks, the Senate's going to get it done. But it's an enormously important bill that will do more to address economic injustice than anything we've seen in I don't know, more than a generation. It's going to make it possible for every American to compete in our economy, and that's going to unleash enormous creativity and growth. And I think, once again, make us the envy of the world. And look, this bill is not just about eliminating barriers to full economic participation. While the infrastructure bill helped mitigate the effects of climate change, the Build Back Better bill actually addresses the causes of climate change. It's a remarkable legislative achievement. And that's not enough. Because while working on this complicated legislation, and it is complicated, Democrats all over the country have also worked outside of the legislative process to support science, for example, throughout the battle against COVID, and to push back on attempts to ban and even burn books in school districts across the country. So while some of you suffer from that particular disease of the left, that kind of perpetual hand-wringing because we Democrats are always arguing with each other, take a breath. Whew, we're getting things done, really big things. And that, I think, is worth a pat on the back. I was thrilled when the House passed the president's Build Back Better agenda yesterday. And unlike a lot of others on the progressive side of the ledger, I was not going to let the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict send me into a tailspin. No doubt that some in the Republican Party are going to run him for Congress now. He's going to get important posts. He's going to be a big speaker at the CPAC tours. But that's who they are. And you know what? I don't care anymore. We are getting things done, and that's what matters. Hopefully they will see the light at some point. Anyway, we have a great show today. Will Bunch is a national columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I'll say more about him in a minute. He's joining us first up. Neisha Blandin, the head of strategy for Swing Left, will be here later. I got caught up with Amar Moussa, who is the Rapid Response Director of the Democratic National Committee. I caught up with him yesterday, and we recorded it, and I'll play that for you because I think it's interesting, but you'll have to forgive me for some of the sound on it. I didn't fully understand what my microphone was doing, and I apologize in advance. And then Rachel Bitecofer is going to be here. She is fabulous. She's all about Democratic message. She's a political scientist. She runs a PAC. Very smart, very take no prisoners, which I kind of like. And of course, at the end, I have some good news for everybody. And along the way, we might even talk about the Supreme Court. And of course, I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys at 773-763-9278. Now, I want to get started with Will Bunch. And let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we'll get him on the phone. Will is a national columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. He's an author of a bunch of books. He describes himself as having strong opinions about what's happening in America around social justice, income inequality, and the government. And, I think some of you know this by now. I also have strong feelings on these topics. And I've read a lot of his pieces, and I commend them to you. I think he is very thoughtful. And now I'm happy to talk with him in person and eager to hear what he has to say. Will, are you with us? Not yet. Okay, my fault. This is me still not quite knowing how to read all the things in this newsroom. Anyway, you can go on, he has his own site you can go on, or you can go on the Philadelphia Inquirer site to see some of the things he's written about. And I initially wrote to him to see if we could talk when he wrote about what's going on in colleges and universities around the country. And there were some interesting things, including this idea of a brand new University of Austin, which tied up some people here at the University of Chicago were involved in that for a while, although President Zimmer has recently stepped down. Real interesting issues around colleges in the country. But that was all of a week ago, and so much has happened since, and he's written about so many things since then, including a really lovely story that I'm hoping that we'll talk about. So, Will, are you with us?
I'm here.
Hi there.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. I was. You probably didn't hear the introduction that I gave for you because you weren't on the phone yet, and that's my fault. But I was telling everybody about some of the things you've written about, and how impressed I am with how thoughtful you've been about quite a wide variety of issues.
Well, yeah, I write 3 columns a week, so I have to cover a lot of ground. So I'm the national columnist, but I try and keep up with politics, the media. I have kind of a special interest in higher education, so I cover a lot.
Well,
thanks. I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about higher ed, and particularly all that odd stuff around the University of Austin, but not first. I think because of everybody's mood today, can we start with the story about the anti-LGBTQ stunt and a rural Pennsylvania library?
Oh yeah, I'd love to talk about that because it's a story that starts out like so many other stories these days, but then there's a nice plot twist halfway through.
Set the table and tell everybody about it because I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, so this happened in a place called Fulton County, Pennsylvania, which is, if anybody listening has ever been on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, it's like exactly halfway between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. One of the most rural counties in Pennsylvania. Only 14,000 people live in the whole county. Very, very Trump Republican. I think 85% voted for Trump, which is just kind of crazy. I think it was the highest percentage of any county in the state. And like a lot of other rural areas in the country right now, they seem to be caught up in this culture war against, whatever they interpret as being woke is now a threat to them. The beginning of the story kind of fits into the whole book ban, book burning that they're talking about, whatever situation, and it involves the library, the public library in Fulton County. Over the summer, somebody approached them and said, hey, there's a small LGBTQ plus community here in Fulton County. They're kind of invisible, but people would like to have a support group. We have a couple people interested in organizing it. Can we use the library as kind of a safe space, a public space? And the library said, sure, that's our mission, to be open to everybody in the community. And so I think flyers or something went out to invite people to the group. So people in the community who were not particularly LGBTQ plus friendly, heard about this group, and there was some rumbling. Anyway, the library, like most libraries, they've had their budget cut over the years. They went into the county commissioners and said, we'd like to get back to where we were 10 years ago in terms of funding. Can you give us an extra $3,000 this year?
Hold on. I'm just going to for 1 second so people understand how little the place we're talking about. They're asking for $3,000?
Yeah, well, yeah. So, I mean, the county stipend they get is not their. I mean, thankfully they don't depend on the county as their main source of support. I mean, this is just a small part. I mean, I think their overall budget might be about $250,000 or whatever. So it's a small budget, and they were getting $12,000 from the county, to help them keep things in balance, and they used to get $15,000 back a decade ago, and they said we'd like to get back to where we were. And the county commissioners, which the county commission is 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, only because they have to have a minority party member. That's why they have a Democrat. But the 2 Republicans who basically run the county said absolutely not. And when they asked why, they said, well, it's because of this LGBTQ group that you're hosting here. We consider that to be a hate group, which is just, I mean, that's just, it's shocking, right? And the Democrat who supported this pressed them on it, like, what are you talking about? And they compared the group to either, so this is like Black Lives Matter, or I guess to be politically correct, they said, or the Proud Boys, and one of the 2 commissioners started going off on this crazy tangent, which I can't even explain what this has to do with the issue at hand, but about Muslims and we wouldn't want Muslims coming into our county. And then he started talking about some conspiracy theory about a Muslim plot to overthrow America that's, already been on Snopes.com and debunked. And, so they didn't give them the extra money. In fact, the Democrat dropped the whole issue because she was worried they would cut their entire, $12,000 stipend altogether. This meeting was covered by, I guess, the only reporter in town, which is a reporter for the weekly Fulton County newspaper, the travails of local journalism these days, right? I mean, it barely exists. But there was a reporter for the weekly paper there who, realized this was significant, interesting, and made it like the lead story in the county paper that week. And so word got out. And, even these rural communities in Pennsylvania, you do have a few progressive folks, people who don't like Trumpism, don't like the things that are going on, don't like this culture war. And one woman who actually, she moved to the next county recently, but she lived just down the street from this library for a number of years and was a big supporter of it. And she heard of this and she said, I bet if I started a GoFundMe site and publicized this issue, I could probably get even a little bit more than the $3,000 they were seeking. And this woman's name is Emily Best, and she'd run for office as a Democrat locally, so she's a bit of a progressive. And by the time I found about it, and this was like maybe 3 days into it, through social media and whatever, she'd raised $12,000 on the GoFundMe. It turned out, and I didn't realize it at first, that somebody else also had a Facebook group trying to do the same thing. They had raised $9,000, and so I wrote a column about it this week. And after my column ran, I think now Emily's GoFundMe for the library is up to $25,000. So
it's such a great story, Will. It's a great.
Getting turned down from 3,000. Now they've raised over 30,000. I think like 34,000, I guess, from the 2 groups. And this library does like any rural library you can imagine. They do so much good. They provide hotspots that they give away to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to access the internet, which is so critical these days. They have all kinds of services for people in the community that they can use, 3D printers, sewing machines. I mean, these are things they're talking about getting, or just getting extra computer terminals so people can come into the library and connect to the internet, and or buying audiobooks or ebooks, or all, which are very expensive these days. Yep. And so now the library is going to have an opportunity to use this extra money on some of these things, and it was all because some people in this rural, mostly pro-Trump community said no to hate, basically. That's how this all happened.
It's a great story. I mean, they said no to hate, and miracle of miracles, there was a local journalist, right?
Right.
It's just...
Yeah, and, I can't say, writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer, I have a much bigger audience, but I went out of my way to credit this journalist and the work that she had done, because otherwise we wouldn't know about it at all. And this is a bigger crisis these days, and it's getting some attention. I mean, there was the PBS documentary last week about the small weekly paper in Iowa, which is the same thing, where these papers where it's one or two people driving around onto like every school board meeting and every township commission meeting, and I mean, it's a crazy job, and even local politics has become so bitter these days, like you just saw with this LGBTQ thing in Fulton County, Pennsylvania.
Well, you told a story here of hate, of bullying, of tough guy talk and conspiracy theories, and this is an example of being able to stand up to it and being able to right this wrong. It's a great example.
I mean, one reason I wanted to write this story is because something else that I've written about recently, I mean, it ties into something else I've written recently, which is just, I think Democrats and the progressives who are the base of the Democratic Party, I mean, I think they're absolutely doing the right thing in pushing these programs in Washington, like the Build Back Better program and the infrastructure program. I mean, those are absolutely the right things to do, and they should be done. But I think there's some naivete that maybe just by, if we just pass these programs and explain to people how we're helping their lives, that we'll do better in some of these communities. And the thing is, it's all culture. It's just hard to trump the emotion of the culture war and the way that Republicans stir people up over these, scary sounding things like, critical race theory, which isn't even really being taught, but, getting people worked up about teaching white kids in our schools to hate themselves. And the thing is the Republicans always do. I mean, they're kind of overplaying their hand, right? They're banning books. You've got video now of these, school board members talking about burning books that they don't like, and I really think Democrats should go on the offensive on the culture wars and say, look, we have a culture. We have a culture of openness. We have a culture of democracy. We have a culture of tolerance. And this is the culture that's under attack right now. And, what this woman, Emily Best, and this other woman with her Facebook group, what they were able to do in this rural county is just one small example of how you fight back in the culture war. And I think this needs to be a broader strategy. I mean, if I were not a journalist, if I were a politician running for Congress in 2022, I would put this culture war, the culture of free speech, openness, tolerance. I would put that front and center. I would say, I don't believe in book burning. I don't believe in banning certain books. That's not what America's all about. I mean, I really think that the Democrats are going to. I mean, they're in such a tough, difficult situation for these 2022 midterms, and because
of the districts and everything else.
Yeah, and we saw, like, with this Paul Gosar thing this week. I mean, we saw how badly the Republicans behave in Congress, and do we really want to give these people majority control of?
Well, you wrote about that too, and I'd like to get to that. Can we take a brief break? Yeah. And then when we come back, let's talk. You wrote a column about what to expect if the GOP takes over. And I don't think you said it was Fox News with subpoena power, but it's close. So let's talk about that when we come back.
I'm David Hochberg. It's Saturday. You either recently filed for or are getting ready to file for a divorce. You have questions about your home or purchasing a new home, which is why you should call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender. I've been divorced and know how overwhelming divorce can be, but it doesn't have to be that way. Team Hochberg has helped thousands of listeners, but we can't help if you don't call 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Homeside Financial Legal Housing Lender, unless 112-4061.
We've all been spending more time indoors than usual, but FinishingChicago.com has an offer to update your interior. Whether your space is residential or commercial, for a limited time you can save up to 25% on painting and decorating. FinishingChicago.com has the most dynamic interior spaces available from industry-leading union craftspeople. That's union quality, efficiency, and industry-leading expertise in your home or commercial space. Visit FinishingChicago.com to find a contractor in your area. This unprecedented access to union quality labor at a reduced rate is only available for a limited time. Revitalize your spaces with fine decorative upgrades applied by the most knowledgeable craftspeople in the industry. Whether it's a new color or transforming your walls into something truly special, our contractors have all the options. Take advantage of FinishingChicago.com's Update Your Interior savings before they're gone. For up to 25% off your new finish, start with FinishingChicago.com.
This is Gary Menzel from Roofers and Waterproofers Local 11. Are you happy with your job, or are you looking for a new and exciting career? Wouldn't you like to get up early every morning and head into work so that you could be home early to take your kids to baseball, basketball, or gymnastics practice? Consider a career with us. We're professionally skilled roofers and waterproofers, OSHA trained for on-the-job safety, and our union is growing. Construction remains strong in Illinois and Wisconsin, where we just recently opened a brand new apprenticeship training center near Madison. Union roofers and waterproofers work outside in the fresh air every day, and we get paid well for the hard work we do. We have family health care and a pension plan that you'll be glad you have when you're planning your retirement someday. We want you to earn a living wage and learn to work safely. So if you're ready to join Roofers and Waterproofers Local 11, give us a call, 708-345-0970, and learn more about us at rooferslocal11.org.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, I'm back with Will Bunch, who is a national columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. He has his own newsletter, which, before we're done, Will, you can tell people how to sign up for. And you wrote a column warning Democrats what to expect if GOP takes over the House. Do you want to preview that horror show for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, two things. I mean, the reason I wrote it is, I constantly hope and try and advocate in my column for a better America, but I'm also, I guess because I've been a political journalist for 40 years, I'm very much a realist, and the realist in me is just incredibly pessimistic about the Democrats' chances right now for 2022. And there's a variety of reasons for that. I mean, some of it is, I think the media's coverage of Biden has been terrible in a lot of ways. And, I think, the public is in a terrible frame of mind, and it may get worse because COVID case counts are rising, and I don't know what this winter is going to be like. But, you have voters in a surly mood and looking for reasons to, punish the people who are in power. And then on top of that, you've got this whole redistricting, gerrymandering situation where Republicans in states that are almost 50-50, but they control the legislature, are drawing these maps that are 75%, Republican in 50-50 states. So the Democrats who only have like about a 3 or 4 seat majority in the House right now, are going to lose at least that many seats, if not more, net. I mean, they'll gain a couple in some Democratic states, but I think net they'll lose more states than their majority. That's correct. Just from redistricting. That's correct. Yeah, just from redistricting. Yeah, and then and history is history. Unless there's a 9/11 type event, which of course absolutely nobody wants to see, but unless there's something cataclysmic between now and next November, the party that is in the White House is always punished in the midterms. It's just a historical thing that seems to be almost impossible to avoid for either party. So all of those things. So my column looked at what's that going to mean practically, because I think the first thing is I honestly think there's, I don't know, an 80% chance that if under Republican control of the House, President Biden will be impeached. And I guess your first question would be, well, what are they going to impeach him for? And my answer would be, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it could be Hunter Biden's, laptop or his artworks, or, it could be, they could go back to pulling out of Afghanistan and it was done chaotically, or they'll find something procedural that they'll say, because that's the mindset of the kind of people. Remember also another thing, and I didn't even really get into this too much in the column, but the handful of moderate Republicans who are in there now, like Adam Kinzinger or Liz Cheney, they're going to be gone in the next Congress, and they're going to be replaced by people who are, more of like the Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Paul Gosar type people are going to be their replacement. So there's going to be this tremendous momentum to impeach Biden, if nothing else, just as revenge for the Democrats impeaching Trump twice. Of course, Trump deserved to be impeached, and he actually did things that were impeachable. So, but you're going to see that. I mean, obviously he won't be removed from office, but it'll be just another thing that's going to tear the country apart. Any unanswered questions about the January 6th insurrection will remain unanswered, because obviously those investigations will be shut down. Instead there'll be probably a score of, Benghazi-style investigations of every Democratic-run, department, agency, will be hearing, and that's probably what they'll spend most of their time on, because we all know that the Republicans aren't actually interested in legislating in terms of, passing things that would help people's lives. The only constructive thing they've been able to pass when they've had power has been tax cuts for corporations and for billionaires. Which they've already done several times. Who knows? Maybe they could do that again. But I'm sure they'll pass. I'm sure they'll pass bills to ban critical race theory teaching, or pass like abortion legislation that President Biden will have to veto. But it's going to be a real nightmare. And I think the reason I wrote the column is I think the time to start talking about it is now, because again, this gets back to what I was saying before the break about waging a culture war for a liberal progressive culture. And again, I think if you really lay out the stakes for voters, I mean, Joe Biden won by 7 million votes in 2020 because he was able to. He basically fought a culture war. He said he was fighting for the soul of America. He, centered the launch of his campaign around what happened in Charlottesville, and he won over many voters who aren't the most liberal voters, but they were repulsed by Trump and Trumpism and what was happening in the country. And I think if people really dwell on what's happening now and what could happen in 2023, I think they'll also be repulsed. But the question, and the question is, can the electorate be riled up? So some of these communities where turnout typically drops in midterm elections, like young voters, for example. Young voters turned out in unusually high numbers in 2020.
Yep.
Donald Trump out of office.
Yep.
And, and I mean, honestly, and I wrote this in a different column, not in this column this week, but, I mean, the Democrats, I think, have blown an opportunity not to do more for young voters in terms of doing more about student loans. Getting rid of free community college was literally the first thing they dropped from the bill when something had to go. I think young voters want to see more about climate change. I think they'll be somewhat pleased by this legislation if it can pass the Senate. But I mean, if the Democrats have to somehow convince young voters, non-white voters, African Americans, Latino voters in those communities that still vote Democratic, that this is a high-stakes election. It's not a normal midterm. That really, again, if you thought you were saving the soul of America in 2020. Well, we need you to save the soul of America again in 2022.
Well, I
don't work? I don't know.
The Republican Party that you are describing, the one that might take over, the party of the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the party of Trump, doesn't resemble anything that we've had in our country in a major political party for as long as anyone can remember. And they are not remotely a majority point of view. The things that they stand for, even their cultural battles that they're fighting are not battles that the majority cares about. I don't know how long America will tolerate the skewing of our democratic structures so that this very vocal minority with values that aren't shared by most Americans. Most Americans aren't cruel. Most Americans don't rip kids from their parents. Most kids don't point guns at people. Most Americans, this isn't who we are. I don't know that we'll put up with that for too much longer. I think we've reached their, maybe they'll win and maybe they will get into Congress and overplay their hand. But I think people want to move the country forward. I think they just want to get on with their lives. They don't want to pay as much attention to politics, and they want things to work. And the Republican Party doesn't do anything to make anything work.
Yeah, it is frustrating. I saw an interesting poll this week that specifically looked at this issue of anti-racism education or critical race theory, as Republicans call it. And it showed that a majority of Americans want more and better anti-racism teaching in schools, including independents. I think it was like 7 out of 10 independents support anti-racism education in the schools. So you're right. The Republicans are overplaying their hands. They just, I don't know. They seem to have this turnout edge in these off-year and midterm elections that it's just been so hard for the Democrats to overcome. But yeah, it's you're absolutely right there. It's a minority viewpoint. So the question is, how do you get the majority to unite and rally behind this cause?
Well, so zoom out with me a little bit. I wonder how much of the anger on the right and the unease on the left is a reaction to the dynamic changes in our society. And no society is as dynamic as the American one. Just think the transformations brought by the digital age, the internet and social media are enough to destabilize lots of places. But in really fairly recent history, we've seen a sea change on issues like gay rights. We've become a much more diverse nation, and our thinking about diversity has changed. But not all of these changes, and that drives the right to distraction. But some of the changes in our culture drive the left to distraction. For example, gun culture. We've seen an enormous change in gun culture. So both the left and the right look at certain parts of America and they say, gosh, I don't recognize what I see anymore. Right?
Absolutely. I just spent the last year working on a book, and it's funny because at first glance you might not think of this as being the primary cause of it. So what I looked at in my book, it's called Resent You, but it's a look at college and higher education, and basically trying to label that as like the thing that really broke America apart, in the sense of, you were talking about digital and the knowledge economy, and people who've been shut out of the knowledge economy because they didn't have college opportunities, or they come from rural areas or from underprivileged communities, and they're shut out. And these people are angry and resentful, and they feel that they're being looked down on by the winners in this kind of winner-take-all economy. And I really think that drives a lot of the resentment, And you talked about like support for gay marriage, and as more and more people do get higher education and spend 4 years away at a college campus or whatever. And again, it's not a majority yet. Only 37% of Americans have a 4-year bachelor's degree, but it's nearing half the population. And people who have that experience are more, studies have shown they are more tolerant and more supportive of diversity. And yet these are the people who've been shut out of those opportunities resent, and have grievances against. So I think that's really when you really step back and look at what's driving the changes, I think those changes, you can say it's changes in education, or you can say it's changes in college. But the big division now is educational attainment. I mean, the Democrats more and more becoming the party of the college educated, to the fact where, to their detriment, I mean, they're seeing some non-college, Latinos and even from non-college African Americans drift away from the party because the party has become so associated with the kind of college-educated culture. So I mean, I think that's really the line right now, and it's going to take a lot of work to, I honestly think, reforming education and what we do for our young people and giving young people more opportunities. I think maybe some radical steps, like really promoting kind of a universal 18-year-old gap year, where people from 18-year-olds from different backgrounds can work together on common projects, like conservation and climate change, for example. The civilian conservation, the civilian climate corps that President Biden has proposed, for example. I think we need some of these radical solutions because, right now the country is ripped in two, and all these things we're talking about are a result of, like you said, two sides that just don't see eye to eye on anything.
Talk about higher ed. You brought it up. Talk about the whole debate. And I'm thinking about the University of Austin, but the whole question.
Well, just quickly about the University of Austin, because I know that's when you and I first touched base a couple of weeks ago about me coming on the show, and we were talking about that issue in particular. And just really quickly, I mean, the University of Austin is this new startup college that, like it sounds, would be located in Texas, and it's basically backed by all these kind of quote thought leaders, unquote, on the political right, with a couple of multimillionaire backers behind them. And the whole idea is to address what they see as the big problem in higher education. And what they see is, excessive wokeness, that there's this culture of what they see as liberal intolerance on campus that is, shutting out ideas like conservative ideas that, that you have to, think a certain liberal, progressive, politically correct way, or you're afraid to speak out or speak your mind on campus. And, I mean, a couple things. One, I mean, to me, there are big free speech issues on campus these days, but the bigger threat we've seen really from the right. We've seen, these Republican-dominated college trustees in states like Florida, North Carolina, clamping down on liberal professors, and this thing in Florida recently where they tried to ban professors from testifying in a voting rights case because they were on the opposite side of Ron DeSantis, the Trumpy governor of Florida. So, I mean, to me, that's the bigger threat of free speech. But the other thing is, to identify that as the biggest problem in higher education. I mean, the biggest problem in higher education is access to higher education.
Access and affordability, by far.
Yeah. Well, I think those things, I was going to say, I think those two things are related because...
Yep, that's right.
Basically, you've got, our young people are, divided into, the vast majority of people who do have an opportunity to go to college can only afford it nowadays by, taking out loans at numbers that are just staggering. I mean, for this book, I talked to a number of people who have over $100,000. Either they or their family have over $100,000 in debt. And it's just not clear how that money is going to be paid back. And so this limits their, they have to live in their parents' basement. They can't get married. They can't buy a house. I mean, it's really a life-altering experience, and yet that's the price of, it's that people are basically told either you're going to fail if you don't go to college, or you can go to college, but you can only do it. You have to.
Right, you become indentured.
You're going to have to gamble that you're going to make enough money to pay this loan back, which a lot of people don't. Or you're the other 50%, and you're totally shut out. You're from a small town. Nobody's going. to college, partly because of the cost and partly because of other reasons, or your high school education is substandard, and you're told because you didn't go to college and you're not making it in the knowledge economy, you're told that you're a loser, basically, and you are basically, you're shut out of opportunities, I mean, there have been some staggering studies in the last couple of years about what they call deaths of despair, which is, deaths from suicide, deaths from drug overdoses, and related causes like alcoholism or whatever, but mainly suicide and drug overdoses. And the two Princeton sociologists who are the experts on this subject say they're seeing this more and more in younger people, and they said the biggest factor that's driving it is people who didn't go to college, that they feel so shut out of modern society and any opportunity to really fulfill their dreams that, suicide or opioids or whatever become an option. So America needs to address this problem. I mean, I just can't stress it enough. I mean, it's driving our political division. It's driving higher suicide rates, and we need a system where everybody who's a teenager who's becoming 18, who's college age, as we call it, a lot of people aren't going to go to college, but how do we get them opportunities? How do we get them, into free trade schools or, vocational training, or give them, provide, like these gap years, provide internships or things that can get them on the pathway to success. And there's a lot of changes. I mean, people who aren't going to college should be getting higher pay, and they should have more opportunities to join the union. And
there's a lot of stuff, Will, in the legislation that the House just passed that begins to address some of these very problems that you have identified.
Yes, there is some. I mean, they increased Pell Grants, for example. I mean, that's not my favorite way of funding education, but
I agree.
It's obviously better than doing. It's better than doing nothing.
But there are also going to be 15 million new good union jobs for all of the infrastructure work that doesn't require college. There are other pathways, and some of the obstacles to participation in the economy are like, okay, I have a kid, but there's no child care, or all of these things. These obstacles are,
or that can prevent people from going back to school.
Right, exactly. Right? So this bill addresses some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at what's different about European society from the United States, and there's no one simple answer. And people say, well, college is free in Europe, which is sort of true. I mean, it's not totally free all the
relatively
time,
true compared to us. Yeah,
it's relatively free. And that's part of it. But the other thing in Europe is also there's just more respect for people who don't go to college, who go into trades. Because they get 6 weeks of vacation time, they get paid leave, and they work in factories where workers often have more of a say in how the workplace is run.
Yep.
And so there are more opportunities to be happy in those countries if you're not college educated. And I think, I think we should promote as much higher education as we can. I mean, people forget that, after World War II, one of the reasons that there was such a big push to send more people to college wasn't just careerism. It was also just because they knew after World War II and after the Depression, they wanted people to be better citizens, and they knew that higher education promoted better citizenship.
Yep.
And that's why you saw a lot of emphasis around liberal education. And it's why you saw, subjects like sociology and philosophy and English, and those majors took off a lot in the 50s and 60s because the idea was people should just have a better general education. And we've totally gotten away from that. Surveys of college freshmen, I think UCLA has one they give out every year, and so they have a baseline they can look at. In the 1960s, people said, they were going to college because they wanted to learn more to become a better person and a better citizen.
Yeah.
And today they say they're going to college because they need to learn a career.
Yeah, they need to learn to code. Right. All right. So Will, I need to take one more break, and then I want to talk to you about our justice system a little bit. So let's do that when we come back.
I'm David Hochberg. It's Saturday. You're a veteran who served our country and can use a VA loan to either purchase a new home or refinance your existing home, but you don't know who you can trust. Team Hochberg respects your service and has VA loan experts available right now to answer your questions and help you secure a VA loan. Team Hochberg has helped thousands of radio listeners secure VA loans, but we can't help if you don't call 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Homeside Financial Legal Housing Lender, NMLS 1124061.
My mom is a breast cancer survivor. The United Breast Cancer Foundation saved her life. Their free breast cancer exam caught the cancer early, and that saved her life. But now the foundation needs your help so they can continue offering free or low-cost breast screening exams, saving more women's lives. Help them by donating your car, whether it's running or not. They'll provide fast, free 24-hour pickup, and you receive a charitable tax deduction, plus the great feeling you'll get knowing your donated car is going to help save more lives. Just call 800-814-0756 to set the wheels in motion. They take cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs, running or not. Call 800-814-0756. The United Breast Cancer Foundation needs your help, and your donation could literally save women's lives, helping them catch breast cancer early, like they did with my mom. Donate today. 800-814-0756. That's 800-814-0756.
You and your phone have been through a lot this past year. It's been your lifeline to the world. And now some big wireless company is telling you got to buy a new phone from them and sign their contract? They don't control you. With TracFone Wireless, you can keep the phone, number, and network you already have. Already got a 5G phone? Keep that too. Because TracFone runs on America's best networks now with 5G nationwide. Plus, we've got unlimited talk and text smartphone plans starting at just $20. TracFone Wireless. Now you're in control. 5G nationwide access requires a 5G capable device. Actual availability, coverage, and speed may vary.
This is John Daniel, President and Business Manager of the Sheet Metal Workers of Smart Local 265. The principles that guide me are rooted in the simple belief that united we stand and divided we fall. We the people must recognize that a diverse environment with unique points of view is the foundation for success. A culture where labor and management work together inspires innovation, promotes inclusion, creates a sustainable growth for business, the workforce, and our communities. When the entrepreneur's vision is developed and improved with the voice of a unionized workforce, you build more than just a product, you build a stronger future. I want to personally thank everyone who voted for President Biden. He believes in unions. Blue Collar Biden signed the American Rescue Act of 2021, which secures vested pension benefits. It funds improvements of indoor air quality in K-12 schools and provides additional Paycheck Protection Program loans to support small businesses. This is John Daniel from Smart Local 265. Join me in celebrating a return to sanity and a sustainable middle class. Stay union strong.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, Will, we're back, and you wrote about our justice system being broken. Here, you and I may disagree a little bit for the first time, so I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Well, yeah, actually, so I column you're referring to, I wrote while the Rittenhouse trial was still underway, I was very troubled by this Judge Schrader. He's somebody who gets reelected unopposed every 6 years, and yet people went out of their way for years to avoid this guy's court because he's just so erratic. It's not even that he's necessarily a right-wing ideologue. I don't think he is that, but he's just very imperial. He just kind of rules his courtroom kind of on his whim around his personality. And I think clearly, I think we just saw a lot of instances during this Rittenhouse trial where his kind of weird biases, may have had some influence on the proceedings. Honestly, I've been even somewhat more concerned about what I've seen in the trial of the three men who murdered the black dog at Ahmaud Arbery down in Georgia. I mean, it's kind of appalling in this day and age that in a community that has a large black population, I think the county is 27% black, and yet that case is being tried for a jury of 11 whites and one black. I mean, it's really only a slight step up from the Emmett Till era, when you had 12 white men,
Yeah, looking for jury nullification. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, this defense lawyer complaining about black pastors. I mean, it really makes you wonder what century you're in. And I feel, I agree with the people who, kind of in their despair over the Rittenhouse verdict, just feel that we have a justice system that, perpetuates, call it white supremacy or whatever you want, but, is very stacked among certain classes of people who have some kind of privilege in society and against the underprivileged. And that's not a new or a radical thought, I guess. But
let me give you something to think about on this. For years I was a Chicago alderman, and I saw an enormous amount of corruption. Excuse me. The things that I saw that were the most corrupt, were perfectly legal. Because after all, the guys who were making the laws were the ones doing it. So I don't know that I want to blame our courts so much as other things for the corruption around us. The laws that allowed Kyle Rittenhouse to carry that weapon for fun and when he was totally unprepared and he ended up taking people's lives are outrageous. In the Ahmaud Arbery case, I'm not sure it's the court's problem, but society's, that anybody could think that jury nullification in a flat-out race-based murder like that is even possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's my writing for years, that the real question we have to worry about is legal. It's entrenched. And,
Yep.
I mean, this is why when it comes to things like racism, we're talking now more about systems than about individuals and such. And
although the individuals are on trial in the Ahmaud Arbery case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a little weird, but I thought we were done at 2:45.
So, okay. Well, look, we are done. I really appreciate your time. But before you go, Will, tell everybody how to sign up for your newsletter.
Yeah, it's really easy. Just go to Inquirer.com and then /Bunch, my name, BUNCH. And that's all you have to do. And then you just have to plug in your email address. So it takes 5 seconds. And it comes out every Tuesday, and it's a lot of fun. So I hope people will sign up.
Yeah, and you're a very good writer. It's a pleasure to read.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Enjoy your day. That was...
Right, you too. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Again, that was Will Bunch, national correspondent for the Philadelphia Inquirer. At the top of the next hour, we are joined by Neisha Blandin, and I'll tell you about her when we come back. I also saw that a bunch of you called during the time I was talking to Will, and I'm sorry I didn't get to you. We'll take calls in the second half of the upcoming hour again, and I'll, of course, do it again in the hour after that. So I apologize to those of you who called in and I couldn't get you. We'll take a break here, and we'll be back with Neisha Blandin in a moment.
The history of Air America lives here. This is WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
NBC News Radio, I'm Julie Ryan. Kyle Rittenhouse is speaking publicly after being acquitted of all charges in his murder trial. The 18-year-old was found not guilty on all counts Friday for fatally shooting 2 men and injuring a third during protests in Wisconsin last year. After the verdict, Rittenhouse spoke to Fox News host Tucker Carlson about the jury's decision and said, quote, "I believe they came to the correct verdict." Closing arguments are expected Monday in the Ahmaud Arbery trial in Georgia. Brad Siegel has the latest.
A report says a defendant in the Ahmaud Arbery trial in Georgia tried to make a plea deal. CBS News reported Friday the request came from attorneys for William Roddy Bryan. Bryan was the man who admitted to pursuing Arbery with his vehicle and filmed the fatal shooting. His attorney said the prosecution turned it down flat out. This comes a day after defense lawyers rested their cases after calling on 7 witnesses. Bryan, Travis McMichael, and his father Greg, who are all white, are accused of killing Arbery, who is black, in February of 2020 in Brunswick, Georgia.
The CDC director is endorsing the use of COVID-19 vaccine boosters for all adults. Brian Shook reports.
Dr. Rochelle Walensky gave her blessing hours after the CDC's vaccine advisors voted unanimously to recommend booster shots of both Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines. conditions. The boosters are now approved for all adults 6 months after they have received their first 2 doses. The CDC strongly encourages older folks and people with underlying medical conditions to get their boosters before the holiday season.
The California School for the Deaf in Riverside is making history. The Cubs varsity football team has had an undefeated season and has gotten farther than any other year in the school's 68-year history. The team has inspired fans as well as the deaf community with their perseverance and work ethic. They beat Avalon High School last night 62-51 and now head to the state championships. You're listening to the latest on NBC News Radio.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT Willow Springs is powered by ComEd. Lower your energy bills and reduce your carbon footprint with the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, we are back, and as I said at the end of the last hour, I'll take your calls at 773-763-9278 in the second half of this hour. But right now, I am joined again, welcome back, Neisha Blandin, who is the formidable head of political strategy for Swing Left. And as you remember, that's an organization that makes it easier for people to get involved and to have an impact on the elections that are determining the balance of power in our country. Hi, Neisha.
Hi, I'm so happy to be back. A lot has happened since we last chatted.
Well, okay, not all of it's good. So let's just start with, when last we spoke, it was in the run-up to the Virginia elections. Yeah. And you were trying to mobilize in Virginia. So before we move on to new topics, what did we learn from the beating we took in Virginia?
I mean, look, I think, we knew going in that Virginia was going to be a tough fight. Yep. If history has taught us anything, the party in power typically has a difficult time winning an odd year, and especially midterm elections. So we knew that we had a tough fight ahead of us. And I think that the results serve as a wake-up call for Democrats across the country, especially as we head into the midterms. But despite the difficult electoral environment that we saw in Virginia, we still had a large drive of grassroots volunteers and donations to those races, especially the races that we supported and were involved in. A lot of those races were won or lost on the margins in a matter of, percentage points or thousands, hundreds of votes. So we know that the work is still critical. But yeah, we knew that we were in for a tough fight. The results are not what we hoped for, would have wanted. But this is definitely a wake-up call as we head into the midterms.
Okay, so let's look forward. What's coming, and how are you planning for it?
Absolutely. So we started our work for the midterms early this year. Virginia was the first stop in that 10-year strategy. So we rolled out a 10-year strategy to kind of win seats for Democrats across the country, and that started in Virginia. So as we look towards the midterms, our focus is largely going to be on Congress, so the House and Senate, and really kind of maintaining the seats that we have there and where we're able to expand those majorities. But it's really going to be about holding Congress, holding the Senate, and holding the House, especially in the face of redistricting as we are seeing. So that is going to be our main priority next year. And we've already kind of itemized some key target states where we're going to be doing that work. And then we are also still going to be involved in state legislatures across the country, because we know a lot of the critical work happens locally, which is really at the front lines. And a new level of the ballot that we've added to our targets are gubernatorial races. And Virginia was our first time getting involved in the governor's race. We've learned a lot from that experience. So we've added some additional targets. We are looking at, Wisconsin and a few other states that we'll be working to support on the gubernatorial level. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. We've already started laying the foundation, and it's just really about ramping that up as we head into 2022.
I'm thrilled to hear all of that, particularly, the Wisconsin and Michigan gubernatorial races are very important in the upper Midwest and deeply distressingly close. So we have a lot of work to do to protect those seats. They're standing in the Democratic governors in those two states are standing in the way of Republican legislatures who would certify false slates of candidates in presidential elections. So they're literally saving our democracy, and anything we can do to support them is enormously important.
Right, and we definitely see that work as being critical, especially with everything that's happening, with what Republicans are doing in state legislatures across the country.
Right.
So although we're going to be hyper-focused on the federal level with the House and the Senate, but we're not taking our eye off the ball locally either.
Well, the House races are going to be very tough. Redistricting has been unconscionable, but of course the Supreme Court said gerrymandering is perfectly legal, and
Right.
Republican state legislatures have taken out their carving knives and cut up districts to their best advantage. Very odd-looking maps, but they have gained. Right. They've clearly gained. They would win just from the map they've drawn. So we're going to have to fight on their turf.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think, which is what makes the work that we do at Swing Left even more critical, because we focus on those races that are won or lost on the margins, right? Those races that are decided by, a couple percentage points, a couple of votes. I think it's even more important for us to double, triple our efforts in those key target districts where we know every phone call, every dollar spent is going to have an outsized impact in determining, who controls Congress next year. So we're really, which is why we're starting early. We have volunteers that are already organizing, already kind of training, and we're not going to miss a beat. But it's going to be even more critical that we don't take a break and that we continue to kind of build towards,
Yeah, I think one of the lessons we got from Virginia is start early. Start early.
Yeah.
Start early. And build. Well, let me back up. And I'm going to ask you to zoom out with me for a minute, because American politics are, the most complex and dynamic on earth. And many American people have trouble seeing all the pieces. So take a minute and talk about organizations like Swing Left, the place they play in our politics. And in particular with Swing Left, what the challenges were that the organization was formed to meet, and how you hope to impact the political ecosystem.
Absolutely. I think there are so many organizations that play different roles. We have our big national party committees. We have the DNC, the DSCC, the DLCC, that either focus on a single level of ballot, whether it be, the House, the Senate, state legislatures, governorships, and we work really closely with them. I think the need that Swing Left was kind of founded, and the need that we feel, is really helping our volunteers, those grassroots folks who are trying to get involved, but they don't know where to start, right? And they're looking for things to do that they know are going to have a big impact, that they know without the shadow of a doubt is going to help move the needle. So what are those races that are going to determine if, Nancy Pelosi is speaker? What are those races that are going to help determine if my governor is going to be able, to pass these bills, or going to be able to veto, come across his desk. So the work that we do at Swing Left is we identify those key races at multiple levels of the ballot that are primarily those purple districts or those, Democratic holds, so where we have some vulnerable Democratic members. And we identify those districts, and we make it easy for any regular person who may not be as finely tuned to what's happening in the day-to-day from race to race to get involved in a way where they know that the phone calls that they're making and the money that they're donating is going to have an impact in a race that could determine whether or not, we hold the House or we hold the Senate, and whether or not, we can continue to see our elected officials, pass bills like infrastructure and Build Back Better that we just saw this week. So we try to make it easy for folks to get involved, because oftentimes it can be confusing, as you mentioned, to figure out, well, what are the 20 or 30 House races that I should really be paying attention to? Or what are those Senate races that I should really be donating to? We kind of do all the heavy lifting. So this way, folks can just get straight to work.
Yeah, and Neisha, because of the gerrymandering, a lot of people who want to make a difference, they find that the district they live in is irrelevant. They live in a district where they've put every Democrat in the state in that district, and you're gonna win it, right? But that you still want to make a difference, and you feel like the gerrymandering has made your vote worthless. So you figured out how to get people involved, not just in the district they live in, but in other districts where they can have an impact. Right? That's really very important. So you mentioned Governor Evers is one of the races you're targeting in Wisconsin. What are some of the House races that you're thinking about?
So right now we haven't locked up all of our House targets. We're still waiting to kind of see what District 10 gives us once all of the maps are kind of finalized and, all of that work is kind of done. But what we are keeping an eye on are some key states where we anticipate having a lot of those kind of swing districts. So those states like California, definitely looking at New Jersey. We're looking to kind of see what happens, in Texas and different places across the country. So we haven't locked up our House map, but we're very closely monitoring redistricting and looking at the map and working very closely with the DCCC on their frontline districts, such as Underwood, kind of keeping a close eye on some of those key districts that we supported last time that we know are going to be vulnerable again. But we're still kind of waiting to see what redistricting hands us once all the maps are finalized.
Okay, so you mentioned Lauren Underwood. Lauren Underwood is here in Illinois. The redistricting that Illinois is going to do is going to give her, I think, a safer seat. But it's important, every time her name comes up, I feel compelled to tell our listeners that they should get to know Lauren Underwood. She is possibly the hardest working newish member, and this is her second term, of Congress. An awful lot of what was in the legislation that just passed was her work, and she is new to this. She's a phenomenal legislator. Phenomenal. Yep.
She is a key legislator and a key member that we want to make sure gets reelected.
Yeah, she works very hard. She's very smart, understands what legislation is and how to craft it. She's the kind of person that really we want in Congress. But okay, so it's great that we're going to help protect Lauren, but without a majority, it isn't going to matter what she writes; it won't become law. So we need to have a majority. Really tough. Okay, so in 2018, people were fired up, right? You couldn't stop people from voting. They could wait in line for a day and a half and vote. They were going to vote early if they could. That nothing was going to stop Americans from voting. How do we get that kind of fire in 2022?
I think folks are still, engaged and energized. We saw a huge ramp up in volunteer activity and engagement in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, I'm thrilled to hear that. That's great.
Yeah, we definitely saw, an increase in our volunteers who are out there knocking on doors. But that doesn't mean that we can kind of rest on our laurels, right? We did still come up short in Virginia, and we know that going into the midterms, the national, state and national political headwinds are going to be challenging on every level. And we also know that the Republicans are out there campaigning on outright racism and creating culture wars. And although Donald Trump isn't on the ballot and he isn't in office, which was a big motivating factor for a lot of folks back in 2018, he may not be on the ballot, but the GOP is still his
party. It's his party.
Running on his anti-democratic and right-wing agenda.
Hey, I don't understand some of the things that happened in Virginia, and I don't want to pick on the campaign that was run, but the idea that the Republicans anywhere in this country can run on education and get away with it is appalling. And I'll talk about this, later on after you're gone with somebody else. But I want to just say the only thing Republicans know how to do with schools is to defund them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So they should not have gotten away with that. But
right, and this goes back to the agenda that they're running on, right, which is just outright dog whistles and racism, and I think where we saw, and with the work that Swing Left does, we work on those races that matter most, those races that are decided on the margins.
Right.
So all the calls of the work that we did, it contributes to kind of closing those margins and pushing folks over the finish line. And it's really about combating that Republican playbook that we saw that was rolled out in Virginia.
How many districts? Given what's likely to happen in redistricting, I think if you make a difference in the whole country, I don't know, not even 6 districts, that's what's going to take. That's how we have to think about this.
Yeah, it's really going to be won or lost on the margins. We are anticipating, as we look, as we're tracking redistricting on the House side, that we're anticipating we'll probably have anywhere between 30 to maybe 50 at the most targets for Swing Left of those swing districts. Even on state legislatures, we have a 10-year strategy to kind of flip and win state legislatures between now and 2030. And next year is going to be our smallest program as we scale that up. But we're anticipating about 30 to 40 targets on that front.
That's great, too.
With another 8, possibly 10 on the Senate side, and another around 5 to 8 gubernatorial targets. So overall, we're looking at about a handful, about 100 or so, a little over 100 target races that Swing Left will more or less be focusing on.
Yeah, at all levels. At all
levels. And with that, bringing back our Swing District Finder, which was so crucial in motivating folks back in 2018 in finding their closest targeted swing district. So that district that has the ability to determine if we're going to be able to keep control of Congress, keep control of the House, Senate, which to your point earlier, for folks who want to get involved, but, they've been drawn into a super safe Democratic district but want to have a difference somewhere else, they'll be able to go to our website, use our Swing District Finder that we're going to relaunch early next year, and find the closest swing district at any of those levels of the ballot where they can get involved.
All right. Well, I think that's the headline from this for everybody. There's a Swing District Finder. Find it. Because you have to have impact. You have to have impact. The lines aren't drawn equally. So we have to fight in where we live, but also mindful that it's a whole country.
Exactly.
All right, I have one other sort of, it's a question I hate asking, but the current brand of the Republicans is based in part on thuggish intimidation. This is who we are, and we're proud of it. Do you have to train and counsel the teams that you field in ways to deal with confrontations, and now post Rittenhouse with armed confrontations with the right wing?
That's a good question. So, we work with volunteers and volunteer groups across the country, and we provide a ton of trainings, whether it be training specifically on our tools, on our strategy, how to talk to voters, but concerning, kind of like what you mentioned, kind of this hostility from Republicans and things like that. We also work with a ton of partners that, we partner with, and we provide resources that help to train our volunteers on how to kind of like manage situations like that with Republicans if it so happens. But we really just try to focus on sticking to our message, sticking to our strategy, talking about the work that Democrats are doing. What we have seen, and, I'm sure you've noticed as well, Republicans have nothing to run on but fear and chaos, whereas Democrats have been delivering, like I just mentioned. We passed infrastructure, we passed Build Back Better. Now it's incumbent on us to talk about the work that Democrats have done and how Democrats are delivering for the American people. The Republicans, they don't deliver, so they can only distract. And it's just a matter of getting our message out and kind of drawing those stark contrasts.
Okay, well, I am thrilled to have you back talking about these things. It's always a pleasure. Will you come back again when you've chosen your targets?
Absolutely. We'll make sure to come back and let you know all about those targets and why we chose the ones that we will be choosing.
Thank you, Neisha. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet. Have a good day. All right, we are going to take a break, and then I will take some calls at 773-763-9278, and I will also play you a conversation I had with Amar Musa, the Rapid Response Director at the DNC. We have a lot of really interesting stuff, and wait till the third hour. That's when the fireworks are going to happen. But I also want to hear from you, and again, I apologize for those of you who've been waiting, whose calls I did not take earlier at 773-763-9278. We'll be back after this.
Driving it home with Patty Vasquez.
We have Megan Somerville. Megan, are you still working for Hobby Lobby?
Yes, I've been working for Hobby Lobby for almost 23 years. I present as female. I was forced to use the men's room.
Can we just say, nobody wants to go to the bathroom at a public bathroom. So let people have the dignity and just do their business.
Driving it home with Patty Vasquez. Weeknights from 5 to 6 p.m. on WCPT 820.
This is John Daniel, President and Business Manager of the Sheet Metal Workers of Smart Local 265. The principles that guide me are rooted in the simple belief that united we stand and divided we fall. We the people must recognize that a diverse environment with unique points of view is the foundation for success. A culture where labor and management work together inspires innovation, promotes inclusion, creates a sustainable growth for business, the workforce, and our communities. When the entrepreneur's vision is developed and improved with the voice of a unionized workforce, you build more than just a product, you build a stronger future. I want to personally thank everyone who voted for President Biden. He believes in unions. Blue Collar Biden signed the American Rescue Act of 2021, which secures vested pension benefits. It funds improvements of indoor air quality in K-12 schools and provides additional Paycheck Protection Program loans to support small businesses. This is John Daniel from Smart Local 265. Join me in celebrating a return to sanity and a sustainable middle class. Stay union strong.
This is Joan Esposito, and here at WCPT, we love pets. So much that we're spotlighting an adoptable, adorable dog or cat every month. So many deserving pets are waiting for their forever home. We've partnered with community shelters and our sponsors, Love for Dogs Pet Grooming and Mark Drugs, to talk about why rescue is best. It's all on Joan Esposito Live, Local and Progressive. See our current adoptable at WCPT820.com.
My mom is a breast cancer survivor. The United Breast Cancer Foundation saved her life. Their free breast cancer exam caught the cancer early, and that saved her life. But now the foundation needs your help so they can continue offering free or low-cost breast screening exams, saving more women's lives. Help them by donating your car, whether it's running or not. They'll provide fast, free 24-hour pickup, and you receive a charitable tax deduction, plus the great feeling you'll get knowing your donated car is going to help save more lives. Just call 800-814-0756 to set the wheels in motion. They take cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs, running or not. Call 800-814-0756. The United Breast Cancer Foundation needs your help, and your donation could literally save women's lives, helping them catch breast cancer early, like they did with my mom. Donate today. 800-814-0756. That's 800-814-0756.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Hey, I want to bring you this interview with the DNC, but I see that some of you want to talk about Kyle Rittenhouse, and I was going to do that at the end of the show, but let's do a little bit of it now, and we'll take this interview in a bit later. Bud, you're on.
Hey, I was watching the trial, and I kind of think it all comes down to everybody was looking at it from a racial point of view, and I think we need to stop that. When I first saw, about a year ago, I first saw the first video clips. I saw some guy walking with a gun into a riot, and I thought, what an idiot. Why would you walk into a gun with a rifle into a riot? And the more I found out about it, I'm thinking, who would be so naive to think he could go there and help? And then when he got on the stand and I saw the video, he literally, one reason he got off, because he was innocent. He literally thought he was going to get killed. If he didn't defend himself and shoot the people, he would have been killed. And the three people that killed him were very aggressive people. It was all on videos. But somehow this becomes a race issue, and it shouldn't be. If we can look at each other as all people and not everything's based on someone being black and someone being white, we can get along a lot better. I think we need to stop always trying to see everything through the lens of color.
All right, Bud, I appreciate your comments, and thanks for calling. Let me just say, I think the Rittenhouse verdict was interesting for lots of reasons. The race context comes up because you think, would the verdict have been the same if he were black? There's not a lot of evidence that they would be the same if you look at what's happening around the country. But this is a gun case more than a race case. I agree with that. And the comment was that he'd have been killed if he didn't shoot. But of course, he would have been killed with his own weapon. So if he hadn't shown up with it, it wouldn't have been an issue at all, right? The laws that allow a guy like that to show up carrying a military weapon, that anybody thinks that's a good idea, I mean, that's at stake here, more than what happened in the courtroom, more than what the jury decided. The underlying laws that would make it okay to take a weapon like that to no matter what side you're on, to take that weapon out there and be part of that protest. They're dangerous for the country. They're not making us more free. Of course, this is entirely the fault of the Supreme Court, their terrible Heller decision, which broke precedent and tradition to redefine the Second Amendment entirely. The founders included in the Constitution, after all, to allow for a well-regulated militia, not to allow for an unregulated vigilante. So that's a huge problem. And by the way, the Supreme Court now, okay, I'm going to go on a tangent, but it's talk radio. I'm allowed. The same right-leaning Supreme Court that gave us Heller and crippled law enforcement and really played into and unleashed this perverse gun culture in America, that's just one thing they did. But what the majority has done to our democracy may be worse. And I have three decisions, and I'm just going to lay them out there for you guys, and you can call me and tell me you think I'm nuts. But three decisions. This court, right? The first was Brnovich, Attorney General of Arizona, versus the Democratic National Committee. And this was the case that gutted the Voting Rights Act. And because of that, this is why we're seeing in one GOP-controlled state after another the rollbacks of protections for voters and the ability to mess with elections. That's one. And then they passed Citizens United. They had the Citizens United decision, which we've talked about here before. It unleashed a torrent of dark money into our political system, perverting democracy, and by the way, funding those GOP efforts to undermine democratic reforms in state after state. That's two. Then there was the Rucho decision against Common Cause. And this was the one that disgracefully said partisan gerrymandering is perfectly legal. It means that political parties in charge get to pick their voters, not the other way around. And we're seeing the impact of that across the country. These are recent decisions. Recent. And they're every bit as damning as Plessy versus Ferguson and Cruikshank in our history. And I am, this is Supreme Court. It's posed to do more damage. It's going to hear Roe v. Wade, and I suspect, overturn that. But the underlying damage to our democracy that those three decisions, those shameful decisions made, are they're a reminder, frankly, that to defend the society against these travesties, the legislature has to do its job. You can't rely on the courts. The legislature has to do its job. So in order to address the voting rights ones, Congress has to pass the Freedom to Vote Act. They have to do it now to undo this damage. You know what? And to go back to Rittenhouse, they need to find ways to pass common sense gun laws that will withstand the disgraceful Heller ruling. Or here's something truly unthinkable. Maybe we rethink the Second Amendment. Anyway, Danny, you're on.
Yeah, just to tack on to the Wittenhauser thing, I don't think it's so much gun laws. I think the reason, one person I blame is the governor and the mayor of that town. They let this thing go on for days. You let a riot go on for a few days, somebody's going to get hurt. Doesn't matter what the gun laws are. And one of the guys that threatened Kyle Wittenhauser, he had an unlawful pistol on him. At least that kid Kyle was carrying the gun and was not concealed. I don't think it's a gun law. I think it's the riot that caused the problem, and the governor who wouldn't stop it. He let it go on.
Yeah, people were all over the country deeply disturbed by the killings, mostly of black men, mostly by police. And as we know, last year, there were lots of protests. Almost all of them were peaceful. Some weren't. Almost all were. We have to find a way to deal with the underlying injustice. But having everybody show up with weapons to a place where people disagree at night is a formula for people getting shot. And by the way, it happened there, but it happens on the streets of Chicago at night too, and it has nothing to do with anybody's politics. The damage done to law enforcement generally, whether somebody's got an illegal handgun or somebody is carrying a military weapon that he doesn't know how to really use to a party, this is all bad for all of us. But Danny, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. Stanley, you're on.
Hey, how you doing there? I don't know if you got. I don't know if I'm missing something or if something's not sounding right to me, because what was the march about? What was the march about? Wasn't that Black Lives Matter and what was going on with,
It was part of, yes, it was. And it was a specific incident there in Kenosha.
Exactly.
But it's part of things that happened all over the country. There were marches in Chicago, there were marches in Minneapolis, because. But that was particularly about Black Lives Matter, and you guys are sitting there saying, well, we need different gun laws. Kyle Rittenhouse didn't go there because he had a gun, because he wanted to be a nice guy. Now, you guys act like he went there to be a nice guy. You're putting this off on gun laws. He didn't go there to be a nice guy. Wait. I'm not defending him. I think he shouldn't have gone at all. And I think
you're saying that, but you said it had nothing to do with kind of like it really was race.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I hear you, and I hear that's how it sounded. That's not what I mean. I think his issue, the issue of his getting off for shooting and for taking the lives of two people and shooting a third one, that narrow issue of how he got off is an artifact of our gun laws. The fact that he was there in the first place is because it was a Black Lives Matter protest, a protest born of an injustice that was happening, and it is happening, time and again across the country. So I think you're absolutely right about why he was there. I'm just talking about why he got off. He got off because the gun laws let him off. But he was there because, he didn't show up with that weapon in Charlottesville when the Proud Boys were marching. You're absolutely right about that.
Well, that's why, because I'm just listening to some of the callers say it's not a black issue. Well, it's not a race issue. I think it really was a race issue, because that's the reason why he went there.
Yeah.
It wasn't there because he was trying to be they're trying to put him as a nice guy, and he was only, No.
Well, he's going to be a Republican congressional candidate, and we can talk about it there because they love this stuff. But the truth is, there are two issues, right? One is the unjust policing that led to the deaths, the unjustified deaths of young black men across the country that led to lots of protests. And I can't believe that these guys are going to get off for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, but the country has a ways to go here on these issues, and we are nowhere near where we need to be. That is a race issue. That will stay a race issue. And this guy went there. He didn't go there to fight against the Proud Boys in Charlottesville. He isn't going to fight against white extremists. He didn't go to protect the Capitol on January 6th. He went there because it was a Black Lives Matter protest. 100% agree with you. But he got off on the trial because the gun laws are screwy.
Well, I just tell you, this kind of makes me think that now whatever happens later on, that you got all these people who are now with these different views of what's going when the next Black Lives Matter protest or something happens, these people go there with, like Kyle Rittenhouse. All thing they have to do is say they fear for their lives.
That's right. That's the
I fear for my life.
And look, it's not. I mean, again, it's not just. I mean, our memory is so short, right? Because we're thinking about, this thing that just happened. But if you think back to Florida, right, and a guy named George Zimmerman, right? George Zimmerman followed and then murdered Trayvon Martin. Right? And he got off because of supposed stand your ground laws in Florida.
Exactly.
Right? So there are two things. The racial animus that motivates people to grab their gun and show up and try and intimidate people, particularly black men, to intimidate them to where they think they belong, which is appalling in every possible way. It's as disgusting a thing to imagine as there is. And then the gun laws that say, and if anybody looks at them cross-eyed for doing it, they get shot and they can defend themselves. So we have to, I want to eliminate the laws that protect people who do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Thank you for your call. I really appreciate it. All right, Pam, you're on.
Afternoon. I just wanted to, inform your audience that initially the Black Lives Matter protest was because Jacob Blake was shot in the back.
That's correct.
7 times.
That's correct.
Why the officer just held him.
Yep.
And so I just want to, and then also keep in mind that at some of our protests, you have people, and I think even the protest in Minnesota, you have people who are provoking things that are white. People who are white are committing violent acts as if those are black members. That's been proven. That's been reported in the reports from the FBI. So I want to address also, you talked about laws. Now, the same law being in effect, do you think if Kyle was black, they would have found Kyle, not guilty?
You heard me talk about this before. We have very little evidence based on the precedent in the United States that he would have been found innocent, right? Because that's not been the weight of decision. So I think it's hard to imagine, although the laws really do make it hard when somebody says it's self-defense. I just don't, whoever it is, they shouldn't get off.
No, we're going to disagree. I'm just saying the laws as they stand right now in the United States, they were never meant to serve black people, and they don't. You have unarmed black people beat up, you have unarmed black people incarcerated. So I'm just saying the laws, whatever they may be, but if you don't apply the law in a fair and equitable manner, you get the same result. And if you have officers of the court, law enforcement, who harbor racist, hateful, ideologies or thoughts, then, or, even contempt for poor or marginalized people.
So, Pam, I agree.
If you have those kinds of people in positions of power, then you will not get any equity and fairness in the law. So the law...
So you're making a distinction, Pam, between the law, and I think it's bad law, but you're saying even if it was good law, it's going to be badly enforced, right? It's going to be enforced differently based on who you are and who's doing the enforcing. And I think both are true. Both are true. The laws are not as just as they need to be. And in the gun case, they're overly permissive. But the history of law enforcement, and this is just saying this is what sets Republicans off, to acknowledge that the history of law enforcement has enormous racial bias to it. It sets them off and makes them want to burn books in schools. It makes them crazy, right? Because they don't want to. I mean, I want to look at a picture of what they describe. I've seen this. They advertise what they call these beautiful plantations in the South as sites for weddings. Come rent this beautiful Terra plantation like it was in Gone with the Wind and have a wedding there. And I look at it and I say, who would have a wedding at a slave camp? Right.
Basically.
Right.
Who would have one at a
Right. I mean, call it what it is. Call it a slave camp, not a plantation. It's a slave camp. Right. I mean,
and then understand another ethnic group's perspective. I mean, our history in this country is self-explanatory. But now, in future, moving forward, in a protest, I march, I boycott. But am I, as a black woman, supposed to feel safe exercising my right to peacefully protest?
Yep.
Because see, this is going to. I don't want to say harmful, because black people, we always have to protest and fight. But people are going to be very hesitant about attending a peaceful protest.
Yes, I know. That's their point of the right. They want to make people afraid. They want to make people afraid. Jim Crow wanted to make people afraid, right? That's what it was about.
Sure. But let me leave you with this last point. I would ask you and your audience, so how much will the black community be asked to withstand, right, and be peaceful? Because we're trying to be peaceful, but I don't see the other side doing that.
Well,
and this is not the majority, but there is a violence and a hatred that's being perpetrated against black people. And I guess we're supposed to just march peacefully and try to change law. But everybody gets tired at a certain point. And when we start reacting with violence, then what?
Yeah.
Because right now, it seems like to me, we're trying to maintain the peace. And I don't see that coming from the other side.
Well, I am a strong believer in peaceful protest.
Thank you for the dialogue.
Pam, I'm glad you called. And just so you hear me say this, black history is American history, and if we don't learn, as any group's history is here, it's an enormously important part of who we are, and we just have to know it, own it, and decide how we all want to live together and learn from each other, and we'll be better off. Okay, I need to take a break, and we'll be back. Thanks.
We've all been spending more time indoors than usual, but FinishingChicago.com has an offer to update your interior. Whether your space is residential or commercial, for a limited time you can save up to 25% on painting and decorating. FinishingChicago.com has the most dynamic interior spaces available from industry-leading union craftspeople. That's union quality, efficiency, and industry-leading expertise in your home or commercial space. Visit FinishingChicago.com to find a contractor in your area. area. This unprecedented access to union quality labor at a reduced rate is only available for a limited time. Revitalize your spaces with fine decorative upgrades applied by the most knowledgeable craftspeople in the industry. Whether it's a new color or transforming your walls into something truly special, our contractors have all the options. Take advantage of FinishingChicago.com's Update Your Interior savings before they're gone. For up to 25% off your new finish, start with FinishingChicago.com.
I'm David Hochberg. It's Saturday, and you're constantly complaining about paying PMI on your FHA loan, but you've done nothing about it. If you took out a 30-year fixed loan after June of 2013 and your loan-to-value was greater than 90%, you will have PMI for the entire length of your loan. Team Hochberg has helped thousands of radio listeners refinance out of their FHA loan to eliminate their PMI, but we can't help if you don't call 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Also, financial legal housing lender, MLS 1124061.
This is Gary Menzel from Roofers and Waterproofers Local 11. If you're looking to have a new roof installed this year, let Local 11 Residential Roofers Union send out Filato Construction, serving Plainfield, Joliet, Crest Hill, and the south suburbs. Filato Construction employs skilled and trained OSHA 10-hour certified workers who will work safely while on your roof. Local 11 residential roofers earn a living wage and receive family health care and a retirement pension for their hard work. When you hire Filato Construction, you get competitive pricing, professional union installers, and the peace of mind knowing the job was done right. So if you're a homeowner or a part of a homeowners association and you're tired of a leaky roof or tired of the neighborhood roofer who just can't seem to get it done right, give Filato Construction a call at 815-740-5461. Filato Construction also installs solar roofing with a certified Local 134 electrician. Learn more about residential roofing at rooferslocal11.org.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, we are back at 773-763-9278, and we are talking about Kyle Rittenhouse and guns and the nexus between that and racial issues in America. And I opened that up when I didn't expect to. So during the break, Paul and I reformatted the show, and that my conversation with the DNC we'll have in the next hour, so I can keep talking to you. So Roosevelt, you're on.
Double E, thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
The last two callers you had were African American, okay? Now, notice the difference. The callers before that there wasn't a racial issue. It most certainly is a racial issue, because the laws are not applied the same for African Americans, Latinos, and whites. The judgment, the court, the judges, this particular judge, do you think if Rittenhouse would have been an African American or a Hispanic, do you think he would have dropped the charges about the weapon? I mean, he's scot-free. He doesn't have a record. He could run for office. As a matter of fact, a week ago, Matt Gaetz said he would have him he was more than happy to have him for an intern.
Yeah, yesterday he said it. Yeah, no, listen, I don't, happily, I don't know the answer to your question, because I don't know a case where a confused young black man shows up with a military weapon at an alt-right march and kills people. I actually don't think that's ever happened. So I don't, nope. I can't say, because you know what? People have more sense than this kid.
Oh, well, Edwin, let's connect it to January 6th. Yep. The same thing. If those people would have been African American, they wouldn't have made the third step.
That I agree with. Totally agree with.
Okay?
That I agree with.
So to say that it's not a racial issue, Pam is right. The whole thing was because there was an African American male that was shot by the police.
Yep.
A number of times.
No, totally.
It's happened.
Totally agree about the cause here. My only point is that the laws let him get off. The gun laws let him get off. But you're right that he was only there because it was a Black Lives Matter protest. He was only there because he somehow thought untrained, uneducated, unthoughtful, undisciplined young man can grab a military weapon and somehow he is part of law enforcement in America is a terrible, terrible commentary on the good people in law enforcement and on our society. Absolutely awful.
Now, let me add to what you just said. Do you think that what Trump, he weighed in on it, Trump yesterday. He congratulated him. Do you think that has an impact in this country?
Yeah, it does, a bad one, negative one. Okay. Every time he opens his mouth, he has a negative impact on the country.
So double E, here we go again. You know, the laws are not being applied the same way. And then you have a knucklehead, and I'm sorry I disagree with you. All through your show, and I disagree with a lot of people that are on this station, to refer to these guys as the Republican Party. There is no Republican Party. Can you answer me a question?
Yep.
Who's the leader of the Republican Party right now?
Donald Trump.
Okay, what is he? What does he hold office?
He doesn't, but he is the party leader.
Okay, hold on. Now, has that ever happened, or do you have a leader that's not even a dog catcher, doesn't have a license, doesn't practice law? All he does is crash weddings. So a wedding crasher. Is the leader of the Republican Party. That's the truth. I mean, I'm trying to be funny, but it's funny, but in a messed up way, because that's what is the leader right now. There is no Republican Party, and that's the problem that we have as Democrats. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to direct it to you. We got to start calling these guys like they are. They're anti-American. They stand by Russia. They're not American. They're anti-constitutionalists.
They certainly don't believe in democracy. You know,
exactly.
They don't believe in it.
They don't believe. Look at the pillow guy. They don't believe in a fair election. They believe in winning at any cost. And they wipe.
You have ruined my day, Roosevelt. You've ruined my day. I haven't thought about the pillow guy in weeks, and now you're telling me to look at him?
There you go.
I was happy with that, because we have actually a lot of good news to talk about, and you've reminded me about the pillow guy. Ugh.
But Double E, I got to call it as I see it. And what I see in front of me, it's one party. And the party that you mentioned, which I do agree, is the one that's doing all these great things
for
this country, for the future.
Yeah, up against
there is no Republican Party, Double E.
I would rather they disappeared. I think there is one, and in its current incarnation, it is anti-democratic and bigoted and problematic. I agree with that. All right, Roosevelt, as always, it's a great pleasure talking to you, and I'm going to move on because a lot of people want to weigh in. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, Bernard.
Yeah, you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, let me throw something at you. I don't know how old you are. What's going on, and I thought about it today. This is the ghost of Howard Miller.
You'll have to explain.
Back in the 60s, I don't remember what scrape that they got in. It had something, I think, to do with that election and the rioting. But Howard Miller was on radio station WIND, and he basically was sounding like the Trumpers and everybody that's calling positive for what's-his-face. And he got fired. And if some of these old-timers will remember, that is who, back in the 60s, they just stifled him. And that's how this country ran. And now all these people are popping up.
We have always had a streak in our country that is like this. And we, Father Coughlin during the Depression on the radio did this. The hate speech has been part and intolerance.
You got to talk to some of the old timers that remember Howard Miller. He was the popular one on WIND.
If I find somebody to tell me about him, I might even try and look up, because I'm crazy. I might even, if I might spare time, see if I can get a recording and hear it. If he sounds like Rush Limbaugh or something.
Well, he just suddenly popped up when Daley was. That's when Daley says to shoot him.
Oh, the shoot to kill order in '68?
Right, and he was on the most popular radio station in the Chicago area, WIND, and he got fired. They kicked him off.
Well, we don't kick. Yeah.
But that's where this country changed, where these people were stifled, and they just emerged, and this is what's going on right now.
Well, we have to take them on, Bernard. They're here, they're talking, they're carrying their weapons, and it's up to us to make reality intervene. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on. Lots of callers. Rachel, you're up. Rachel?
It's your guest.
Oh,
are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you. I'm sorry. You know what? You and I are supposed to talk. I was taking like callers, right? And it says Rachel.
Yeah. No, I can move. I mean, I could be a first-time caller.
but can I ask you to wait a little longer? Because you and I should talk after the break, because I want to start the 3 o'clock hour.
No problem.
All right, hang on, Rachel.
I figured it was a mistake.
Hang on.
Thanks.
Okay, Dave, you're up.
Hey, Edwin. Hey. On that prosecutor, he screwed it up when he didn't vet that survivor, and it turned out that he had the pistol.
Yep.
He didn't do a mock cross-examination on him.
Yeah, a lot went wrong in the trial, no question.
And it turned it into another like Mark Furman, where suddenly, the whole case got blown. Because in Furman's case against O.J. that time, when he testified, and they said that I never said this word.
I remember. I remember. Yep.
Yeah. And real quick, when you mentioned about this other trial coming down in Georgia, there, that should be straight up murder, but it going on. There's going to be some unhappy people on either side of how that goes. If it goes wrong, and they free those rednecks, well, they're going to burn Atlanta. And if it goes like it's supposed to, then those white supremacists and whatnot, they're going to go down there and do a number on it. It's not going to be good either side.
I'm going to disagree with you on that. I think this is as clear a cut. I mean, again, you don't want to they're being tried, right? But what we've seen in the trial is very damning evidence. And if there's jury nullification, if the jury says it's okay to do this to a black man, you'll bet there'll be anger. And you know what? I'll be as angry as anybody, because those are not the ideals of our country. And if they're found guilty, I don't expect anything but grumbling. I don't expect violence. I don't expect violence either way. I think determination is what we're going to have, because we've spent a couple years having a conversation about race in America that's, I don't know, a couple hundred years overdue, and I don't think we could have had it before. The conversation in the 1960s wasn't this conversation, in part because the separation between blacks and whites was so big that people, even when they wanted to, they didn't know enough about each other to be able to have these kinds of conversations. I think we're having them now. I think it's better for the country. And I think that we are shining a light on incidences like the murder of Ahmaud Arbery that we didn't always look at in the past, or that weren't looked at by everyone in the past. I think the black community is fully aware every time somebody got strung up on a tree, which is what this was. So let's, I think we are making painful progress here. And I think in the end of the day, no matter what the result is, there's going to be determination to continue making that progress. But I appreciate your call, and I have time for one more. And Dave, Dave, you, I think, were the longest waiting. Dylan. I lost you. Dylan.
Hi. This is Don. Am I on?
You're on.
Oh, great.
Sorry, Don.
Yes. No problem. Talking about the racial tones of the Neisha trial, I look at it and everybody says, would this be the same as if it was a black man? And again, I heard another caller say we have to stop. One way to stop racism is to stop looking at everything in a racial term. I'm Hispanic, and you know what? I think this would have been the same outcome. I mean, some people complained that O.J. only got off because he was African American. we have to remember that this was a Black Lives Matter protest that it turned out that 3 convicted felons, one of them was a child molester who attacked Kyle. These guys were there. They were white people. He shot 3 white people to defend himself. There wasn't any black people involved. And I think the whole reason this riot was allowed to go on for days, if people remember, is the governor and the mayor and everyone was afraid to shut it down for fear of being called racist. So everybody's so afraid of being called racist that they let the violence go on. And again, stop looking at things in the terms of a lens of color. Just look at us all as equal people, all God's children, and we go on from there. It's kind of like when you're kids, 2 kids fight, and your mom and dad said, I don't care who started it, stop it, and get on.
Yeah. Well, we can get there if we're honest about how we got here. We're not there yet. And, I have kids. I raised them. I sometimes say exactly what you said, which is, hey, you guys got to stop. But if one of them brought a military weapon to the conversation, I'd be doing more than telling them both to stand down. Anyway, thank you for your comment. We're at the top of the hour. I need to take a break, and we'll be back with Rachel, who I had here a moment earlier than I expected. I'm thrilled to be talking with Rachel Bitecofer when we come back. Thank you for your calls. Hang on. We'll be right back.
If you have been financially affected by the COVID pandemic, then this message is for you. Are you among the many folks who have lost their jobs, or if you've been furloughed or working from home at a reduced pay? If you have credit card debt and cannot make your monthly payments, we at Debt Fix Pros can help. Call us to see how we can reduce your interest rates and lower your monthly payments. If you are struggling with credit card debt, we can help. Call 800-707-1097. That's 800-707-1097.
NBC News Radio, I'm Julie Ryan. Police in Atlanta are investigating a security scare at busy Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Officials say the airport tweeted there was an accidental discharge of a firearm today inside one of the terminals. The FAA temporarily halted flights because of the security incident. It comes as millions of Americans are expected to travel for the Thanksgiving holiday. And wind and rain may cause travel delays at the start of this holiday week. Brad Siegel has more.
A system of stormy weather is expected to drench the Midwest and later the upper Northeast, bringing abundant precipitation and high winds to the region beginning Sunday. The conditions could cause air travel delays just as thousands of people across the country head out of town for Thanksgiving. The rain and wind are expected to die down in the Northeast by Thanksgiving Day, although rainy conditions will still persist in the Southeast. The TSA expects 20 million air travelers, nearly the same number as Thanksgiving 2019.
President Biden's $1.7 trillion spending bill is on its way to the Senate after finally passing the House. In a statement Friday, Biden called it another giant step forward and said the measure is fully paid for thanks to wealthy Americans and corporations paying more in taxes. The head of the CDC is endorsing the use of COVID-19 vaccine boosters for all adults. Dr. Rochelle Walensky signed off on the move shortly after the CDC's vaccine advisors gave their thumbs up on Pfizer and Moderna booster shots. The additional doses are now available for all adults 6 months after they completed their first vaccinations. The CDC strongly encourages older people and anyone at risk to get their boosters before the holiday season. Joe Exotic is no longer in a Texas prison. The Tiger King star has been transferred from a correctional facility in Fort Worth to a federal medical center in North Carolina. A social media account run by his attorney says he's been diagnosed with cancer and that the transfer is part of his treatment. The second season of Tiger King can be seen on Netflix. You're listening to the latest on NBC News Radio.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT Willow Springs is powered by ComEd. Lower your energy bills and reduce your carbon footprint with the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program.
Sunday mornings with Brandon Johnson at 9.
Georgia signs this sweeping voter rights bill that takes away voter rights, that I can't even give people sitting in line to vote water anymore. And white men are in a room signing the bill. A black woman knocks on the door and gets arrested with 2 felonies. Now, if that ain't America for you.
On WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
To the Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, so better late than never. I'm back with Rachel Bitecofer. Rachel is a political science. She's the founder of Strike PAC. If you've seen her on MSNBC or read her work in Slate, you know, and Rachel, I'm going to say this and you can correct me, but Rachel is not a peacemaker. She is about crafting a Democratic message that counters the GOP branding. Rachel, is that right? Do you think I have that right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right? I mean, I would call myself a homeopath, right? It's not that I'm not a peacemaker, because in my heart of hearts, I'm fervently trying to steer America away from democratic catastrophe. Like, really, the reason, the driving force is peace, right?
Right.
But it's the recognition that you cannot go up against a nuclear weapon with some flowers and hope that you're not going to get steamrolled. It's just not going to work that way.
I'm from Chicago, Rachel. If somebody brings a knife, you bring a gun.
No shit. Oh, sorry, I can't say that on radio. So used to doing internet. Anyway, yeah, you're right. Chicagoans, my friends, right?
We know how to fight.
Yeah, you know how to fight, right? And you got to bring, like, the Democratic Party at some point forgot how to do the politics of politicking, and it's not about policy right now. It's about stabilization of the republic.
Yeah.
Enforcement of the rule of law. So we really have stakes that we're fighting for that are at this point, it's almost like a life support system for the republic, right, that we're trying to defend.
Yeah, I think we have to walk and chew gum. I'm thrilled with the legislation that we just passed and the big bill that passed the House, but I agree with you that isn't going to be enough, that we have to talk about this and engage in a different kind of politics. Have you had a chance to study the recent elections in Virginia and New Jersey? And if you have, what have you learned?
Yeah, no, it's more than that. I mean, here's the thing. A year ago, when I set out to form Strike PAC, which is it's an absolutely ludicrous, ambitious goal. It is recognizing in 2020 that the Democrats, my forecasting and research as a political science professor, and people should definitely go and read that if they've never heard of my work, anticipated that the Democrats would have a great year in 2020, a year out on my modeling that doesn't do polls. And everything I predicted played out exactly as I predicted it would at the presidential level, but down ballot, in a year when the incumbent party has murdered 500,000 people from ineptness, right, callous ineptness, and holding hostage economic relief in the Senate, the Democrats lose 14 seats in the House. Right?
Yep.
That is, I mean, I can't even, those are the best fundamentals a political party could ever ask for, to go and make the case against the other party. And they didn't even bother to present that evidence, right? And never even prosecuted that case. So to me, at that moment, I realized, okay, this modeling that I'm bringing, because it is so forward-looking, I need to try to get people to understand, A, what's coming, and B, how to solve it. And so with New Jersey and Virginia, it's a long wind-up to say, a year ago, as I was setting out and building the beginning of Strike PAC, I was telling people, this is exactly what's coming. Virginia is still a swing state. It fell out of competition because of surge turnout amongst the left, and that includes independents that lean left and the base. And it's not going to be there anymore now that Trump is gone. And if you don't find a way to really enhance that and to deal with the fact that, like, most of the small segment of the voter population that does swing, like, they don't pay attention to news and current events, are going to tune back out, and so, like, they'll just be basing their Virginia and New Jersey thing on whatever the GOP serves up to them, and it will be emotive, and it will be personal, and it will overshadow what we do, because ours will be impersonal, wonky, and collective, right? And so, and for months ahead of time, we knew it was going to be this CRT issue. That CRT doesn't mean anything. It's not meant to mean anything. It's meant to mean we're going to protect you, white people, from feeling guilty about white privilege, right?
Okay, so stop right there one second, Rachel. I cannot believe that the GOP, that we let the GOP win an election on schools. I mean, as I said before, and you weren't on the call, the only thing the GOP knows to do with a school is to defund it. They loathe teachers. They really don't like books these days. Their science curricula includes classes like horse medicine for humans. Don't even ask them the difference between history and mythology, right? But in Virginia, Dems lost the debate on schools. How would you, I would go, I'd take that fight any day, and I'd bring it back to them and tell them what they're hearing from the other side has nothing to do with your school, and everything to do with trying to make you afraid of people who don't like you. Like, is that what you're counseling?
Right.
Huh?
Yes, exactly. Like, that's exactly what I was saying in real time, and begging people to give my organization the money to do is like, okay, if they want to talk about schools, let's do it, dude. Let's have a referendum on schools, because they're absolutely, their record is absolute, poop show.
Right.
I mean, the record is poop show on everything, and so that's really what Strike Pack is trying to get people to understand. Like, they wanted us to talk about race, because if we're talking about race, and in the context of specifically challenging, white people to think about their privilege, then you're not going to win the politics. You win the merit, you win the ethics, the morality, the facts, the substance. All of that's true. But if you're talking about it to close your campaign and not instead lobbing offensive attacks on education against them, on the economy against them, on insurrection against them, then they've already won, right?
So their approach, Rachel, is they don't care what the issue is, right? They're gonna take CRT until we figure out how to answer it, and the moment we start to answer it, they're gonna pop up some whack-a-mole up somewhere else with some other social issue. They have them. They're the most important thing in the world. Then they're not on Fox News anymore because we figured out how to answer that lie, and they move on and invent something else, right? So is your strategy that we need to just be so aggressive that they don't have time to do this to us?
Yes, I mean, partially that they are able to do that because they don't have to devote any, let's think about them as like 100% resource pie. They don't have to devote almost any of their resource to defense, okay?
Yeah, or to governing.
Or time. Right, and to governing, because they understand that the electorate is stupid, right? So the electorate can get infrastructure, and you're not going to see 10-point bounces for Biden from infrastructure. The electorate can be, is telling America, hey, a party that's literally voted lockstep to bury an insurrection should probably be given control of Congress next year, right? So, they understand the clay that they're working with in the American public, which is not the clay that Democrats want to be working with, right? But it is the clay that we have to work with. It's a tuned out public that has been it's not stupid intellectually. It's civically starved. So it doesn't understand how government works. It certainly cannot understand the complexities of divided government. And the Republican Party long ago decided they were going to try, hey, let's just forego governing and govern for political effect, basically.
Well, right. This is Kevin Phillips. It goes back to him saying we can just take the greatest number of ethnic animosities, and if we can do that and capture them in a bag, we can win every time.
Well, that and they just realized that delivery does. In other words, the American because you can't deliver boldly, right? You can only deliver incrementalism in the American system. And I'll probably break some Bernie lovers' hearts when I say this. You could put Bernie Sanders in that White House right now, but you still have Joe Manchin sitting in a state that Trump carried by 35 points, and Joe Manchin, like every other elected person, is thinking about his own electoral calculation, right? AOC serves in a district that no Republican will ever be competitive in, and therefore she is free to be AOC. Joe Manchin.
But Rachel, I view that as a great benefit for Democrats because it means when we do pass a law, it's legit. It's not the law of a faction. It's not the law of one group of disgruntled, whatever they want to call us, right? Whereas the GOP is increasingly, every minute, more and more homogenous, more and more of one mind, and that mind is in Mar-a-Lago, right?
Yeah.
That's who they are.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a party that voted 70% in the House, that House caucus, in the ashes of the Capitol burning from the insurrection to overturn a legitimate election, which at that point was already the most verified and accurate election we have ever held in this country because it was the most recounted and audited election we've ever held, right?
Yep.
So not only was 2020 not stolen, 2020 is now in the history books the most accurate election, verified and accurate election we've ever held, right?
I'm proud of America. This was the biggest and fairest Democratic election that I think ever and anywhere.
Oh, of course.
I mean, more people vote in India, but this was
about election fraud. What they have now extended that to mean to your average rank and file Republican voter that is really engaged. It now means that because the state legislators, the Republican state legislatures would not let Democratic governors allow for pandemic remote voting. Remember, they wouldn't let the laws in the states change. So the governors had to use executive bypasses. Their claim is that's the fraud.
Actually, I'm going to one-up you on that. Their claim is that black people voted, and that's the fraud.
Yeah, well, yes, of course. I mean, that's what it is at the voter level, right? And if we're full circle, I'm so glad you brought it back to that. Here's the reality, folks. Okay, nobody wants to go out there and say, hey, our answer is to hit voters with personalized messaging that has people talking about their grandmother being exposed to the pandemic and dying because Greg Abbott wouldn't let people wear masks, ban them, right? Forced businesses to reopen in the height of the first wave of the pandemic. These are hard things to do, but you have to understand that the other side, the only thing they care about right now in American politics is beating us and maintaining power. And they are willing and able and are currently doing whatever it takes to do that. So, our idealism is a weapon that they are weaponizing against us. You said, they come up with these things, and then the main reason they cook up CRT and defund all this stuff that they do is because they know we can't help but take the bait. They know that if they come up with some outlandish thing and they're totally wrong on the facts and all of that, we will not be able to keep ourselves from spending the next month on progressive shows like this, national TV, talk shows, stages, politicians, all across our spectrum. We will debate the merits of the stupid thing that they have put out into the sphere, and that keeps that radio, airwave transmission velocity from being able to focus on things that would hurt them politically.
And what are those things that will hurt them politically? I mean, a bunch of my audience here is in Wisconsin and Michigan, where we have enormously competitive governor's races going on and legislative races. And I think the fate of the republic is going to be decided in those states. So what are the messages that
and here's the bad news, too, because the Virginia electorate is an ideal electorate for Democrats. So all this happy stuff that maybe other people might give you, you don't get that stuff from me. I tell you what you need to know, not what you want to know. What you need to know is that college education is the big defining realignment factor. So even in Wisconsin, yes, there's a urban, rural, suburban difference, but what you're seeing within those regional things is education, right?
Yep.
And within that, the Virginia electorate, the Colorado and Virginia electorates are more educated than the North Midwestern ones are. So if it was bad in Virginia, it means if we don't make massive changes right now to how we're doing messaging and narrative framing on this, then we are in really bad shape.
So frame a message for me. Yeah. That will resonate.
Here's the message. You're in the Midwest.
Yeah.
You are in patient zero, the crater that killed all the dinosaurs of Reaganomics, right? It's not 1992 anymore. It is 2021. We have a 40-year track record of the Republican social experiment that was Reaganomics. And guess what it did? It decimated the American middle class. It took America from the greatest country in the world and plummeted us down the scales in K-12 education, investment in our infrastructure. I mean, you go overseas to Europe, to China, and it is apparent that we have dropped not just from the top 10, but from the top 25, at least, in this kind of investment. So you can go into these Republican strongholds, right? These Republicans have controlled those areas in particular unilaterally now for years. What do these areas have to show for it? And now they're finally going to get something. Who's bringing it to them? exclusively the Democrats, right?
No.
So you just got to go in there and you got to make the GOP own this message. America, please listen to me. Steal this thing and co-opt it and make it ours. Promises made from the GOP, promises broken.
Yeah, they privatize gains and socialize losses, and the Democrats, look at that and go, boy, that is truly corrupt and unfair.
It's not enough to tell people what you want to do for them or what you will do for them. You have to set it up in a way that makes those people more afraid of what Republican governance is going to do to them personally than what Democratic governance is going to do. That's what the GOP has been doing for 10 years on their messaging, and we have to modernize our own right now, today, to have a chance.
So you're saying we have to let reality speak for itself. I mean, what Scott Walker did to Wisconsin is evident to everybody who lives in Wisconsin. And it's one of the reasons why he's no longer governor, and we've got a Democratic governor, but we can't let people forget what that meant.
Well, here's my point. Here's my point, though. It's not evident. Okay, the thing is evident. This, my crappy school, my bridge that fell on and crushed me, or whatever. Those
the money I gave to the Chinese for Foxconn for the no jobs.
Yeah, but the blame is not evident, right? What they do is like whatever it might be, this inflation stuff, right? Almost nothing to do with Biden, right? They're going to blame it right on Biden. So like if I'm there and I have the budget I need, I'm going to come to Wisconsin, I'm going to blame Ron Johnson and the GOP and Trump's trade wars for inflation, because at least then voters are hearing two different sources of blame, right? So like we have to go in there and say, Republicans are going to hurt you. They're going to hurt your children's education. They're going to take your money from you. The Democrats gave you the biggest middle-class tax cut in decades. The Republicans want to repeal it if they take power.
And give it back to their wealthy donors.
Make people feel afraid, right? And if you're blasting, and the problem is the other side is going to make them feel like that. So like if we just choose to have a principles and ideas debate, and the other side is using fear and emotion and threat, the Facebook whistleblower told you already, America, what works better. Right?
Hang on, Rachel. I got to take a break, but let's come back to this because you can talk about how social media amplifies this when we come back. It's really important.
Sure.
Okay, hang on.
Tom Hartman.
So what is it if it's not poverty that causes crime? What is it? Well, it turns out it's inequality. And inequality causes crime because it literally makes us crazy. We are wired for fairness. If you don't believe this, walk into a preschool class with a couple of dozen 3-year-olds, a big pile of cookies, and give just one cookie to all the other kids and watch what happens.
The Tom Hartman radio program. Weekdays 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
This is John Daniel, President and Business Manager of the Sheet Metal Workers of Smart Local 265. The principles that guide me are rooted in the simple belief that united we stand and divided we fall. We the people must recognize that a diverse environment with unique points of view is the foundation for success. A culture where labor and management work together inspires innovation, promotes inclusion, creates a sustainable growth for business, the workforce, and our communities. When the entrepreneur's vision is developed and improved with the voice of a unionized workforce, you build more than just a product, you build a stronger future. I want to personally thank everyone who voted for President Biden. He believes in unions. Blue Collar Biden signed the American Rescue Act of 2021, which secures vested pension benefits. It funds improvements of indoor air quality in K-12 schools and provides additional Paycheck Protection Program loans to support small businesses. This is John Daniel from Smart Local 265. Join me in celebrating a return to sanity and a sustainable middle class. Stay union strong.
This is Joan Esposito, and here at WCPT, we love pets. So much that we're spotlighting an adoptable, adorable dog or cat every month. So many deserving pets are waiting for their forever home. We've partnered with community shelters and our sponsors, Love for Dogs Pet Grooming and Mark Drugs, to talk about why rescue is best. It's all on Joan Esposito Live, Local and Progressive. See our current adoptable at WCPT820.com.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, we are back, and Rachel, who among other things is a scholar and she studies data, and she paid attention when the whistleblower came and talked about Facebook. And Rachel, you were about to say that we know something about the Facebook algorithm, what it is that engages people and what it is that gets shared. And it isn't public policy.
Yeah, I mean, more than that, technically speaking, the way what the Second Amendment is a public policy, right? But the GOP talks about it in a way that's emotive, fear-based, and threatening, and that gets engagement and more than just likes and shares, but activity, right?
Right. So anger, anger and engagement are the things that get shared.
Yes. Well, threat, emotion, and fear cause engagement. Longer engagement, more shares, more content and stuff like that. So, it's an unfortunate reality of human psychology, which is unfortunately how the GOP has retailored their campaign apparatus this last 20 years. Kind of built on marketing and human psych and willing to exploit human psychology for political gain, and they've done that in the media as well. Yep. So it's not a alien concept for anybody. Those two things actually have been a project that have both caused a lot of the hyperpartisanship that we have and the polarization, but it's also caused by, right? So it's not a in one way causal arrow by any means, but yeah, certainly. It's what structures their entire. They don't, and you can really see the folly in how we campaign, because you never hear any Republican consultant, strategist, candidate, politician really talking about how they have to get Democrats to vote for them, right? Like you never hear that in a swing race. Like when they talk about Ohio or a congressional district, it's not like they're out there thinking like, oh my gosh, what do we do? We've got to get Democrats to vote for us. Right? Like we don't, but we do that all the time. We are like, how do we get these Trump people to vote for us? And it's really interesting how.
Okay, well, look, there. I think there's plenty to be afraid of in the Republican Party. I think there's plenty that they're doing that's a threat to democracy. So if fear and threat drive engagement, drive shares, we have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the way that they have, so one of the important things, and this is really important in the Midwest to understand, the upper and the lower Midwest, right? So the political realignment in America around education is playing out now in the Midwest, and it's much more advanced in Iowa, Missouri, and those places have realigned to the right? And what drove that realignment is the de-alignment of white, working-class, blue-collar union people from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. And in the upper Midwest, there is still a realignment ongoing, the extent of which we're unsure as to how far it could go. But like every cycle, the Republicans are using their branding electioneering messaging system, which is very different than this system, advertising messaging system we use to kind of pick away, right, at white, non-college educated whites up there. And what we should be doing up there is brand reinforcement amongst that group, but also white college-educated voters who have tended to vote Republican, or, generationally, Zoomers and millennials whose parents were Republican might come in and be Republicans in the suburbs, now are coming in as Democrats. We should be up there branding the Democratic Party in a positive light, right? Like these things, America, that you like, these come from Democrats. The Republican Party, like if you want climate change, the reason the climate sucks is the Republican Party has killed it, and they're the thing standing away in between you and action, right? Because we just make this assumption that everybody understands we would have climate action if it wasn't for the GOP. Average people do not understand that, and if we're not making that connection in our messaging, then we're not making full extent of that branding rally dichotomy. And the other side is drawing very clear contrast. Most of their advertising is really about disqualifying us as an option.
Well, that's all they've got.
No, and that's true, right? I mean, so they have to make things up most of the time, or they, twist things really, really bad, like CRT, right? This thing, which they're using as a proxy, and they know they're using it as a proxy for white people feeling guilty about the treatment of African Americans, right? And whether or not they should have that that hegemonic privilege challenged, right? Like, that's what CRT is designed to do. But the ad that they ran in Virginia, like, they don't run, like, we think the scope of their horrible wrongdoings are usually so big and the suffering is so immense, we like to macro everything. The problem with that is that you lose the personalization. So, like, the way they attack CRT is they'll use one mom who's, like, really anguished.
Yeah, she was anguished over a Toni Morrison book. Do you think that ad do you think that ad helped the GOP?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Wow. They're way better at that. You know, you put one mom, right? One mom in Virginia, like one mom from Texas whose kid was forced back into school in the height of the pandemic who died. And that reminds everybody, like, oh, God, I'm so glad I had a Democrat that kept my kid out of school. You know, you're always better off with a personal ad. And it just drives me nuts that we don't get that.
Yep. Really interesting. So your research looks at, you know, how effectiveness of advertising, effectiveness of message, and it looks at the GOP strategies around their permanent branding campaign, right?
Exactly.
But I mean,
I studied that as a professor, and now what I'm doing is I've launched Strike PAC, which is STRIKEPAC, and it is a super PAC. It's run by 3 women, me, myself, and 2 co-founders, who are all coming at this from the grassroots. We're not professional electioneers, but we are professional. You know, the Democratic Party needs to learn how to brand and message effectively people. We are about a year from our initial launch. We have now a pretty nice package of ads that demonstrate these concepts I'm talking about on your show today.
Yep.
And we're trying to raise money to come and try to build basically a wingman operation. What I tell people is like a SpaceX to run next to NASA. I want to build a wingman operation that runs next to whatever the Democrats and their independent groups do, because liberals have certain elements about us that make it very hard for us to develop messaging and electioneering technique and strategy that's effective against a opposition that is ruthless.
Honestly, you should see some of these Chicago aldermanic elections. But yeah, so okay, talk a little. So you have
people are like other people look at Chicago politics and oh God, that's some toxic stuff. I'm like, that'd be fun. Like
it's fun. It is fun. It really is fun. I mean, look, politics is the most important thing we do because it sets the direction for the country. But let's be honest, you could also describe it as a sport with no rules, right? And that is terrifying for a lot of people. But you have looked at this and said, you know what, there's some underlying structures here, and we can find ways to move an electorate. So again, Strike PAC, which you've set up, is there to partner with campaigns or independent expenditure next to campaigns. What's your thinking?
Well, you know, before I get into that, I will say, like, to me, like, that's one of those adages that I can't let go just without, like, responding to, right?
Yep.
Because, like, actually politics is about structure. There's so many different structures that actually there's so much fundamental structure that much of what we consider to be random or, like, uncontrollable is actually quite predictable. And we could control it, you know, so like that, you know, my favorite pushback adage is, oh, I'm not a member of an organized party, I'm a Democrat, right?
Yeah.
Well, like that adage is like, there's nothing genetic that we like come out of the womb. I mean, we're Democrats, right? We're some of the smartest, most sophisticated, innovative, most successful people in the country. We're making the best stuff in the world. Like, you want to tell me we can't organize strategically to try to beat back growing fascism and save American democracy? I'm sure we can, right? And so, any case, but yeah. So what Strike PAC is organized as a hybrid super PAC. So I organized it that way because I knew it would predominantly be built, especially initially out the gate, as a grassroots. You know, Bernie Sanders, you know, some grease and elbow grease and tears and blood type operation, but it cannot possibly do the thing it wants to do unless it has a very large amount of money. Making ads that are effective is expensive because they have to be customized. We make the ads ourselves. It's in-house creative because what we're arguing is that the messaging has to be completely revamped. And then the strategic deployment plans are very extensive too. I mean, I'm arguing that, it's not just and one of the reasons why our efforts to change and get better have been fruitless is that we've been tweaking up in the branches and we're tweaking on the, but our base model is flawed. Strike Pack endeavors to rip the tree and the root and the soil out of the pot. Relay soil, relay tree, right? So it's certainly nothing that can be done cheaply, and we would not want to be constrained in any form of...
Well, I'd love to see some of your ads to get an idea of what that looks like.
Oh, yeah, the ads are on Twitter, they're on our YouTube page, they're on our website, and each of them are designed for moving votes. Strike Pack is concerned with one thing and only one thing, and that is moving votes. It's concerned with maximizing the probability of winning and moving votes. So these ads that we put in our startup packaging they are designed to kind of demonstrate, like, how do you do nationalized messaging the way the GOP does it, and not the haphazard and poor way that the McAuliffe team tried to replicate. How do you do high stakes emotive messaging? It's not that the GOP doesn't talk about policy. It's just that the way that they talk about policy is personalized, emotive, and very high stakes feeling for the recipient. They don't do messaging that's meant for persuasion or mobilization, aside from like candidate biography crap. Everyone does that. Everything that they do is brand centric, and it performs like a dual function of conversion, because it's disqualifying basically us from like any swing consideration, but also mobilization, right? Because it's making your side feel the stakes and the threat, right?
So, Rachel, where do you go to see these? Really... Tell everybody how they can...
Again, you can see them on our YouTube page, Strike Pack, the website, so that's striketac.com.
Yep.
You can see them following me on Twitter at Rachel Bitecofer, and follow at Strike Pack too. And you can see them, you can Google me and see a lot of our stuff on, news segments and various media appearances.
Yep.
And I really recommend people do that. And if you like what you see, understand, to bring it to the next level and get it to help us in Wisconsin. I mean,
it's expensive.
I want to come and just napalm Ron Johnson, dude. I mean, Ron Johnson's worst day is if Strike Pack has money to come and engage in Wisconsin. Because between Ben Wickler running that Wisconsin Democratic Party, which also needs
terrific.
money, and he's terrific, right?
Terrific.
And Wisconsin's always the biggest reach, guys, because under my modeling, which no one else uses, I always knew, and I put this out a year in advance of the 2020 election, that Trump would win the Midwest and how. I always knew Pennsylvania would be the easiest one because it has the most urbanization and the most college-educated vote, and that Wisconsin would be the hardest lift. So I don't care what the polls show. There is a way to win Wisconsin. It is like Texas, though. Not as hard, obviously, but it does require finesse, and Ben's the right guy to run that statewide. I sure like to come and just pound Johnson in a way that nobody, representing a formal party would ever be able to get away with.
We love that. All right, well, Rachel, I am very grateful for your...
And he should be forced to own that label, you know?
Yeah, he should. Hey, listen, I have to go to break, and I've really appreciated your time. I'm going to look at these ads. I hope everybody listening does too. And you know what? Call me and tell me what you think after you've listened. We'll talk about that maybe next time. But Rachel, really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day. We're going to take a break and be back in a moment.
The thing about comparing rates at Progressive.com is that by now you've heard a lot of ads about comparing rates at Progressive.com. We probably don't even need the words comparing rates anymore to remind you that seasoning steaks at Progressive.com is an easy way to save on car insurance, or that swimming in trousers helps you find the lowest rate. And that's the thing about foraging for truffles. You've heard a lot of ads about standing tiptoe on a cinder block. Compare rates and sing softly to a wounded field mouse and save at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations.
We've all been spending more time indoors than usual, but FinishingChicago.com has an offer to update your interior. Whether your space is residential or commercial, for a limited time you can save up to 25% on painting and decorating. FinishingChicago.com has the most dynamic interior spaces available from industry-leading union craftspeople. That's union quality, efficiency, and industry-leading expertise in your home or commercial space. Visit FinishingChicago.com to find a contractor in your area. This unprecedented access to union quality labor at a reduced rate is only available for a limited time. Revitalize your spaces with fine decorative upgrades applied by the most knowledgeable craftspeople in the industry. Whether it's a new color or transforming your walls into something truly special, our contractors have all the options. Take advantage of FinishingChicago.com's Update Your Interior savings before they're gone. For up to 25% off your new finish, start with FinishingChicago.com.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, so I had a chance yesterday, right after this fabulous vote, to catch up with Amar Musa, who is the DNC Rapid Response Director. And I want to play you that conversation. This is it. I'm joined now by Amar Musa, who is the Rapid Response Director for the Democratic National Committee, and he's here to talk about the infrastructure bill, some of the amazing things that happened in Congress this week, and just the ability of Democrats to deliver and what it means for people in the country. Amar, hi.
Hey, Edwin, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. It's been a pretty incredible week for Democrats in the country.
What a great week. I'm so impressed that, there's only one party that's governing, really. Only the whole burden falls on the Democrats, and it's a big, diverse party. Getting everybody to stay focused and together to do what happened this week is a remarkable, historic achievement.
1,000%. And I think it's just a testament to the Democratic Party's values, but also the incredible leadership from President Biden and Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer to drive the party forward. And I mean, especially Speaker Pelosi, her record is unmatched, and being able to deliver this incredible bill, not only the infrastructure bill last week, but also today's incredible vote on the Build Back Better agenda that's going to be transformational for American families.
So I stayed up and listened to too much of Kevin McCarthy's diatribe, and it really is clear that one party is focused on bridges and roads and healthcare and the economy and getting people to work, and the other is focused on rage and fantasy land and maybe race. I don't know, but they're not focused at all on governing the country. That leaves all the work of governing, and governing is hard work, on the Democrats.
I mean, 1,000%. And I think, and day in and day out, we see this ideological bankruptcy on the Republican Party, right? Kevin McCarthy, his 8-hour diatribe aside, was actively lobbying his caucus to vote against the infrastructure bill. And we're talking about roads, bridges, clean water for families. This speaks to this. The Republican Party today does not have any kind of platform to deliver for the American people. Meanwhile, obviously, Democrats are working tirelessly to lower costs and to build new bridges and roads, create millions of jobs. And you're right, the burden of governing is on Democrats. And I think American people this week really saw just what is possible when Democrats are in charge. And we started the week off on Monday signing the largest infrastructure package in decades into law, and we're ending the week, taking a huge step forward on delivering for middle class families and lowering costs and historic legislation to lower drug prices and make, life more affordable for families. It is really just a really good day for the country.
Really good day. And it's good for the country's economy, too. I know people have wrung their hands and talked about inflation, and inflation is a concern, but this bill is paid for, and that doesn't contribute to inflationary pressure.
Yeah, I mean, let's remember when Republicans had every branch of control of every branch of government in 2017, and with Donald Trump in the White House, their chief legislation was passing these massive tax cuts for the wealthy and big corporations that added nearly $2 trillion to the debt, right? And last night we learned from the Congressional Budget Office that this package, the Build Back Better agenda, is fully paid for by making the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share. And so, again, when we talk about the responsibility of governing, it's so clear how Democrats are doing the work to move the country forward. And then speaking about inflation, right, we know that this bill is going to lower costs. It is going to make prescription drug prices more affordable. It is going to make childcare more affordable. And we see just last week, Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, talking about how inflation is, quote, a gold mine for us, right? We're looking at Republicans who are willing to use families and the struggles that they're going through as a political cudgel. Again, responsibility of governing is with Democrats while Republicans continue to play politics with people's lives.
Yeah, I don't really want to go here, but Vladimir Lenin, as he was trying to overthrow the Tsar, used to say, the worse, the better. The more we can make people suffer, the better we have a chance of taking over the government. And you just don't expect that from a major party in a democracy.
It is honestly really, really hard to see where the Republican Party has any kind of message for everyday Americans. And you're right, they are salivating at when they watch Americans, struggling, and while Democrats are working to pass legislation to help people.
Well, let's talk about some of the help that is about to arrive. In the part of the country that I'm in, which is the upper Midwest, right? This is a part of the country that led our economy for a long time, and then it became the Rust Belt. And it's reinventing itself in all kinds of interesting ways in the past 20 years. But our infrastructure is old. It's old in Michigan and Wisconsin and Illinois and Minnesota. And the impact of this legislation, I mean, for example, we are in a part of the country that has a whole bunch of lead water pipes. It's going to make an enormous difference. And we have aging roads, and winter is tough on our highways, and this is going to make a big difference. And you've got money in this bill, unusually, for public transit, which is so important in our cities. And even to make the public transit more accessible, extend it in places, to upgrade the infrastructure. Talk about some of the things that are going to make a difference in the lives of people in this part of the country.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think Michigan you touched on Michigan, where Michigan is going to see a huge impact, and that's why President Biden visited Michigan to speak about the impacts that the infrastructure bill is going to have in the state, right? Michigan is going to see, I think, something like $1.3 billion to help improve water infrastructure, and to build new pipes that aren't delivering dirty water and poisoning our children. That is huge. We're looking at a thing that we haven't touched on is high-speed internet. There are so many rural communities who do not have access to internet, and we saw how important that was during the pandemic when children had to do school from home, and we saw kids who were going to McDonald's and sitting in the parking lot with their parents to access the internet. 14% of Michigan households don't have access to the internet, and so Michigan's going to receive a minimum allocation of $100 million to improve broadband, and that's going to be happening in states in Ohio and Wisconsin, expanding internet access, and it's so critical to bring businesses online. Small businesses are going to see an impact here. So
Amar,
go ahead.
I can't, when the Republicans are in charge, they look at the map and they say, oh, Democrats live in cities, so let's disinvest in cities. That's just what they do. They use government for politics and they hurt people. Last I looked at a map, the rural parts of America are not overwhelmingly filled with Democratic voters. And yet we're going to spend an enormous amount making sure that everyone, wherever they live, and this mostly impacts rural America, has broadband access. This is what governing is, right? It's not playing politics. It's doing the right thing for people, no matter who they vote for.
Correct, and that's what President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris said. When they won in last November, is regardless of whether you voted for them, President Biden is working, and Democrats are working for you and for the country. And it doesn't matter about whether you're a registered Democrat or Republican. And that's something that Democrats feel very strongly, is we're going to come together to deliver for the whole country, regardless of your political affiliation or who you voted for. And Republicans just don't see it that way.
I mean, nothing makes that clearer than broadband for rural America, which is, not democratic America, and yet it is part of our country, and we want to serve everyone wherever they live. They deserve the best government in the world in our country, not some, political, we only deliver for our friends kind of kleptocracy that we saw in the last administration.
1,000%. 1,000%. That's true.
What's on the horizon? So the Senate is going to look now to pass the rest of to take up the legislation that Nancy Pelosi just sent them, yes?
Yep, exactly. So the Senate is going to, over the next few weeks, work to touch up the Build Back Better agenda, and we're looking at hopefully passing this. I mean, I'm not one to make to guess on when Congress will finish things, and you know how these things go. But I think we are right on track to get this legislation done by the end of the year, and it's going to be, every Democrat is united on, to get this piece of legislation on the president's desk as soon as possible. So hopefully we have this bill signing happening in the holiday season that's going to be, transformational for families in 2022. Looking at, an extended child tax cut for families, lower drug prices, just a lot of exciting things once this legislation gets through, and taking on climate change, some of the biggest investments to take on climate change. It's really exciting, and so I'm really looking forward to the Senate working to get this passed and getting it on President Biden's desk as soon as possible.
Proving the Democrats do believe in Christmas. We're going to get it signed, and it's a great gift to everyone.
Yep, exactly.
Amar, there's one other enormous legislative need, also very time sensitive, and that's voting rights. Is Congress got the energy to turn back to that important legislation?
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think the vice president is doing incredible work. Vice President Kamala Harris is doing a lot of work on leading the charge to get some kind of voting rights legislation across the finish line. And to be very clear, the DNC is not waiting for Congress to pass legislation. We're hard at work already to doing the work ahead of 2022 and 2024 to protect people's right to vote. And we've seen it across the country. And I know you know this, Edwin, but Republicans are systematically going after people's right to vote and doing everything they can to make it harder for people to vote, especially people of color. And so Democrats, we've announced
voter suppression, and they're doing voter nullification by putting in place laws that let them throw out votes afterwards if they don't like them. And this crazy completely, and I know Democrats engage in this sport too, but the Republicans have done gerrymandering this year at a level unheard of, so that some votes count a whole lot more than others. All of this is anti-democratic.
Exactly.
I don't mean Democratic Party. I mean, it goes against the first line of our Constitution, we the people.
Exactly. And so we're hard at work right now to combat those efforts. We've announced tens of millions of dollars of voter registration drives in key states. We're hiring lawyers on the ground in battleground states in 2022 and 2024, voter protection lawyers who are going to be fighting these Republican attempts to suppress the vote. We're hiring organizers. We have people on the ground already and continuing into 2022 to make sure to take on Republicans in this fight and to make sure that we are protecting everybody's right to vote. And this is an incredibly important thing, personally important for Chair Jamie Harrison. And so we're going to, while the Vice President leads the charge in Congress, the DNC is not resting on its laurels, and we're going to keep taking the fight to Republicans and fighting for people's right to vote.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much away from the storyline we started on, which is the stuff we want to celebrate that we got done. But it is important for people who are listening to know that the DNC, under Jamie's leadership, is taking on an unprecedented challenge, both a commitment to fight in 50 states and to help those 50 states fight throughout each state. At the same time, that organization and that organizing challenge is so big, they also have to do it in the face of an unprecedented attack against voting rights, and against large chunks of the population that don't look like other chunks. It's really an unprecedented time of great import, and we are so lucky to have Jamie's leadership right now at the DNC. He's the perfect person for the job.
I can definitely echo that, and I'm as a person who's worked in politics and has done been in a few different stints. I'm incredibly honored to work for Jamie, and he is an incredible leader, and I think the DNC is incredibly well positioned to fight for Democrats up and down the ballot, not just for President Biden, but also for your local school board going to 2022, 2023, and 2024. And we're ready for this, and really excited to continue to fight for folks.
Well, I think that'll be I'll let you have that as the last word. So we're celebrating great victories in Congress that are bringing real change, infrastructure, and today, at least through the House, the unprecedented passage of the Biden agenda, and a fight both on the ground, in the courts, and in Congress on voting rights. Democrats are delivering, Republicans are hiding, and you heard it from Amar, the DNC's in the middle of all of it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Edwin. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're back live. I hope you enjoyed that. Now, I'm going to end the show as I did last week with some good news. Obviously, the biggest good news is that despite all the naysaying, the People's House is working just fine, passing enormously important legislation that will strengthen America, make it possible for every citizen to fully participate in our economy. We do this by making improvements to health and child care, by expanding educational opportunities, by updating our infrastructure and creating millions of good-paying jobs, many of them in emerging industries around green energy. But that's not all the good news. Shipping delays are down 40% in the Port of Los Angeles this week. And shipping prices have come down 25% in the last 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the Labor Department reported 6 million new jobs, and 8 million more Americans got vaccinated last week. In Kansas, a court has paused the enforcement of that state's HB 2322, which is Kansas's anti-voter legislation. They've paused it to allow for a hearing. That's a big win for us. And for all of you who are the kind of Democrats that the Republicans think we all are, Paul tells me that Harvard beat Yale today. I'm sure you're happy to hear that. The last piece of good news, I have the last two pieces, are very local to Chicago. The Brown Line flyover opened, making the L a lot easier on the north side. And my favorite, Alderman approved an ordinance to allow bars in dogs. To allow dogs in bars. I haven't been to one yet, but it sounded like that. Anyway, if you want to find me and Winston later, we might be at the Bucktown Pub. Have a great week. Have a happy Thanksgiving. I will not be here next week, but I will see you the week after.
I'm David Hochberg. It's Saturday, and you want to sell your home to a family member. You've heard about giving a gift of equity to those purchasing your home for the down payment and closing costs, but you're just not sure how it works, which is why you need to call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender.